County Board of Supervisors and Committee of the Whole meeting, recorded April 10, 2023.
Call the Portage County Board Committee of the Whole to order. And before we start, I want to let everybody in the public, as well as the supervisors, know that we have an item for the county board first to deal with, and it has to do with opioid resolution. We need to make sure that we get it in by the 18th. So we put it on the agenda tonight for the 10th. We'll call for public comments for that as well. But again, the first part of this, the only item that's on there is on opioids. If you want to speak on the opioids, then just raise your hand, state your name. I'm going to allow everybody 3 minutes to speak. And we're going to do things when we get to the committee of the whole, which is the next part. Because of the way our agenda lays out, we'll talk about comments from the public. Then we're going to have a presentation. And then we are going to let the people from the public speak. When they get done with their comments, if there's something that was a question in there or a topic that we wanted to address, we will address it. Someone will who has the expertise in it. And unless there is just one more short comment on it, we're not going to have a back and forth. And then we will go on to the next person to make the next comment. We get done with that, then we will allow the supervisors, we will close the public input, and then we will have the folks on the board have discussion and talk. And any questions, thoughts, concerns, and I'm going to make a hard stop at 8 o'clock. 3 o'clock is probably long enough for everybody. If anybody needs to get up and go to the bathroom, please. So any questions about any of this before we start? Right.
Thank you, Al.
Yep. So I call the meeting to order. Now roll call.
We have 23 supervisors present. Supervisor Olson is excused and Supervisor Morrow is absent.
Pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have anybody for invocation tonight. Members of the public. Members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time with such comments subject to reasonable control of the county board chair as set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. And again, this is only an item that we're reacting on is on opioids. If anybody from the public would like to speak on that. Great. First resolution, authorizing Portage County to enter into a settlement agreement with Everest Pharmaceutical Industries, Ltd., Allergen Finance LLC, Walgreens, Walmart, CVS Health Corporation, and CVS Pharmaceuticals. Agree to the terms of the amendment of the Wisconsin Local Government Memorandum of Understanding, allocating settlement proceeds, and authorizing Portage County to enter into Wisconsin State Local Government Memorandum of Understanding with the Wisconsin Attorneys General to effectuate the term of the settlement agreement in the legislation identified in this resolution. Motion by Supervisor Dubek, seconded by Supervisor Moresi. Discussion. There's no further discussion. All those in favor with aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I will take a motion to adjourn the Portage County board meeting and call to order the committee of the whole meeting. Motion by Supervisor Barry Chakowski, seconded by Supervisor Laddick. All in favor of closing the board meeting and adjourning it, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. I'll call to order the committee of the whole. Members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time with such comments subject to reasonable control of the county board chair as set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. Sheriff, you have the list. Is there anybody else that needs to sign up that wishes to speak? Robin's got a sheet upstairs as well, and she can bring that down. So again, we're going to let Tegra start with the presentation. And go ahead, Mike, take it away.
All right. Well, it's nice to see everybody again. Mike Van Clyde with Tegra. I think I've met most of you. Definitely all of you heard me speak at one point in time. Similar to prior meetings, we're going to work through the questions list that was put together based on the questions that we received from the county supervisors. The beige peach colored ones are questions that we feel have been answered and deserve no more attention or discussion at this time. The questions that were left white are ones that we don't feel as though we had responded to previously, so we're going to address those for the first time tonight. And then there's a few that are green in color, and those are questions that we had some follow-up discussion on with members of the board or members of the public, and so we're going to readdress a little bit of that information again tonight, just to hopefully answer those remaining questions. So, again, as we kind of all know what's coming here in the next few weeks, there's going to be some important votes and there's going to be some very important decisions that are going to be made. Our goal all along has been to give you the information to make the best decision that you can for Portage County. We've tried to do that in an organized manner. We believe that after tonight, we will be able to say we've answered every question that the supervisors have brought forward. So we would again ask that tonight, if there's questions you have, if there's things that you want more information on that we can help you to make that decision, let us know. But that has been our intent all along, is to provide that information so that you can move forward. So with that, we're just going to follow in the order that we always have. We're going to move into question 8.1. District Attorney Cousins is going to come up and address this one. We had a lot of discussion in the past about offender, where they're living and things like that. And so the Cousins was able to put together some information. So if we roll forward here, you should see it show up on the screen. And maybe I'll just start with, you all received a letter earlier today via email. This is that information, but just going to allow for a little bit more discussion.
All right, thank you, Mike. So again, my name is Cass Cousins. I'm the district attorney here in Portage County, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak and present a little bit. As is mentioned, I did submit a letter today, so a little bit short notice. I apologize for not providing that maybe a little bit sooner, because I know that there are some pretty significant decisions being made in the coming weeks. But the reason that I wanted to, I guess, present to you today and provide some info from my perspective is I've come to a lot of meetings and I've watched the proceedings and watched folks discuss these, and I guess I haven't had much to add beyond the arguments that are really out there already. But there was conversation that related specifically to this issue of where are folks who use the criminal justice system, specifically defendants, where do they actually reside throughout the county, and how does that, if at all, affect the question as to where a new courthouse and a new justice center should be built. And so I put together a little bit of information and summarized that in my letter. I guess first I just wanted to indicate my background a little bit, just to kind of explain where I'm coming from with my opinion on this. I've been DA since last August, but not new to the county. I was an assistant DA here starting in 2011, and I worked at the DA's office in 2018. And at that point, I was hired by the Wisconsin Department of Justice. And I was an assistant attorney general for 4 years, traveling around the state, prosecuting drug crime and homicide. So I've been in a lot of courtrooms, and I've been in this courtroom. I've probably tried 100 jury trials there. So I've got some experience actually with this building. And I guess what I would say is, I mean, you've heard a lot, and I think there's agreement in this room about how serious the problem is. And without getting into the details, with respect to where security issues exist, I will say that it is as bad as it's been represented. It's not being overstated in any fashion. It really is approaching the point of being potentially a crisis. And frankly, from my perspective, the fact that nothing bad has happened, I think is really just a product of good luck and good fortune. I think that it's just a situation that has a lot of bad potentialities there. So I just wanted to thank you to this whole board for your work. And I think you're getting close to seeing something happen. So I guess turning to the maps, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because, you know, I looked back at the last 5 years and it pretty much all shows us the same thing. Basically, the software that the DA's office uses, it's very easy to pull data, a lot of different data. And here, basically, what I've shown is addresses for filed criminal cases, at least at the moment of filing, the addresses that are reported for defendants. And as you can see, they're spread throughout the county with certainly a concentration in Stevens Point and Plover, with concentrations in Amherst and other towns around. I guess we could go on to the zoomed in page. Keep scrolling. You can keep. Yep. Gives you a little better picture where the dots aren't quite overlapping quite so much, but I think it gives it some context as to the general concentration of folks. And so again, you know, with respect to your decision as supervisors, I guess I don't know if this is something that affects your decision as to where the courthouse should be built, but if convenience and accessibility are big questions as to where the site should be placed, I guess from my perspective is, you know, these maps do show there is certainly a concentration of where these filed criminal defendants have, you know, their listed address. And in my letter, I have a number of caveats on this, which is I haven't reviewed all of this to make sure this data is 100% accurate. I simply did not have the time to do that. And further, you know, it's very possible that people move or they simply don't have addresses, things like that. And then finally, you know, what we're looking at here is just criminal defendants. It's not the larger population that also utilizes the courthouse and would have business there or are brought there as witnesses or jurors. It doesn't address the concerns of law enforcement and the sheriff's office with respect to the placement of the jail. So it is a somewhat focused set of data. And I guess, you know, I hope is something new for you all as supervisors to take into consideration when you're making a decision for the site. My preference is to build downtown, and I summarized some of the reasons for that. But more than anything, I think that just as I understand the situation, I feel that it's more likely to happen if it's built downtown than in a green site. That's my opinion. And I think there's probably more considerations out there that I'm not aware of. But that's just, I guess, my sense from what I know about it. And the reason I think that's important is more than anything, downtown, green site, I think this just has to be built now. This is the time, and I'm very heartened by the process that I've seen with respect to how this is moving forward. And I guess I would say that, you know, I have a preference, but if this board, this group was to say green site, and that was a decision moving forward, I would support that and look and hope for support for funding of that as well. So at the end of the day, I think it's a project that needs to be built and the time is right. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to take questions now or at a later time. If anyone wanted to look at this data, it's all, I guess, a summary, but it's built off of public information that I would be happy to provide to anyone who wanted to take a look. So that's what I have for you.
So for the rest of you supervisors, it's in your packet, more detailed, but you also have received it in an email that was sent to you earlier today. It's published online. But I believe.
The packet wasn't sent, but the DA Cousins emailed it directly.
Did he email it to all the supervisors? Yeah. So, yeah, it was emailed to you by Mr. Cousins. But you also have a hard copy in this packet as well to review the letter and then the maps or charts. Supervisor Barry Chakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for District Attorney Cousins. How many of the defendants that the pinpoints that you got would have the Portage County Jail as an address and or the surrounding, say, halfway houses, that sort of thing that are here?
That's a really good point. I think that these are reported addresses for people when the charges are filed. So I think there's going to be a proportion of those people that are represented here that are going to be incarcerated. And I think, you know, following the filing of their case would be in the jail. What specifically that number would be, I'm not sure. I think certainly The minority of cases are people who are incarcerated while their cases are pending, but it's a good number. That's something I could follow up with you and provide you a specific figure on.
So Supervisor Matt Chakowski.
Thank you, Chair. How many people from out of county are prosecuted a year?
It's a lot. It's a whole lot, and I can also provide that data as well. I wasn't sure if those numbers would be relevant to this body or not. But when you look at Rapids, when you look at Waukaka, they are pretty densely populated with dots. I would say maybe a quarter if I had to ballpark it, just going off the top of my head. But it is a sizable proportion. I think fewer from up in Marathon County, but and I was actually looking at it, and there's a fair number of people who don't live in Wisconsin that are actually prosecuted.
Supervisor Bob Gifford.
Yes, sir. I've been won over to the idea of evidence-based policy making over the last year or two. And in your role, I see you work with a big data software called Protect. Is it your view or your reckoning on persons that are who will most often end up as defendants, that is perpetrators, tend to be in a lower income demographic in a certain geographic area?
So you're asking if more often than not, criminal defendants are in a lower income bracket? I would say yes. Protect doesn't track any of that sort of data, though. It's a case management software provided to us by the state of Wisconsin. It's used by VA's offices throughout the state. And I guess the primary benefit is for keeping track of case parties, whether they be defendants or witnesses, and then doing all of our filing. But it allows us to generate data that we can plug in to create maps and things like this. It doesn't keep track of vital statistics of defendants beyond basically address and biographical information.
Right, but okay, just to follow up, when I look at the maps, what I see is visual representation of the incomes, I would call income stratification of the county. So that, I've worked in a number of large metro areas like Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, in roles dealing with lower income people. And the word on the street is poor folks commit more crimes, and there's a reason for that, So I would say the idea that we keep the center close to the demographic where they're most likely to interact with criminal justice just makes more sense to me. I don't know if you were trying to get at that in your last couple paragraphs.
I haven't thought about it through that lens. I guess more than anything, I wanted to provide this response to discussion about where do people who come through the criminal justice system generally reside. And I guess I don't think I have the appropriate competence to say why certain areas would have these dots or not. But more than anything, I wanted to provide it as the visual representation to assist this body in making decisions.
Supervisor Splinter.
Thank you for your letter. I read it about an hour before I got here, and I went through your graphics. And I appreciate you reinforcing the fact that we have an unsafe situation in all our courts. Anybody, if you want to bad enough to probably get through the first person guarding people and get into the courts. So we really got it. It makes it an urgent need. When I looked at where your offenders, your sex offenders and everybody are in the county, to me, it kind of represented the last time I patterned my shotguns for turkey season. And each year it changes a little bit, but as far as making a decision on where to put the courthouse, or the convenience of whatever offenders, it has a zero effect on my decision process. I'm more concerned about the law-abiding taxpayers of the county. Thank you.
And I think, I present this in response to the conversation that was had, and my hope is that it's specific data that this board will do with what they will.
Supervisor Keller.
Quick question. Do you think if we move the law center, would the dots just simply move along with it? How many of those people live there because that's where they report?
Again, that's something that's probably beyond my competence to answer. I guess if I had to go out on a limb, moving it from one location to another, I frankly don't know if that would result in a difference with respect to what, the big patterns are that you're seeing there. But again, I would say that's probably beyond my scope of competence.
Well, my other comment regarding that is, people, they don't own a car in Portage County, we have subsidized tax service. People in Plover can ride a cab to the courthouse for $3. People are owning a car. But whether it's downtown or it's somewhere 3 miles away from it, I don't think it's as big a deal as some people like to make it.
And I tried to look at data to see what percentage or which group did not have license, and that was just something that my system couldn't report to me in a really efficient or accurate way.
Supervisor Sislevich.
For clarification purposes, when you say the word defendant here, does that include like a sexual predator? Does it include a speeder or OWI around the store? I mean, everybody?
That's a really good question. First of all, it does not include anyone who's required to register as a sex offender. That's a separate map, a separate infographic. What this represents is by year, the reported address for every filed criminal case that comes out of my office. And that includes felonies, your most serious crimes, but it also includes misdemeanors, and it also includes non-criminal citations, something like your OWI first offense, for example. Those non-criminal cases, if my office is prosecuting it, my intent is that it's represented here.
Anything else? Otherwise, we've asked this question, or it's come up before, and I've used Andrea's name because of a conversation I've had in the past. Andrea, do you have anything to add to this topic or worth sharing? You could stand up, please. Yep.
I would say, I work with a small population that gets referred to our office. And a lot of them are not are pretrial, so they haven't been found guilty yet. We do work with, on average 20-ish OWI pretrial offenders per month, and they generally don't have a license, but they are getting to our services, regardless of how that is. One thing I will say about our services is that they are required to show up and test, but if they miss, we have some leeway of trying to get them to come a different time. Court hearings are a little different. They have to be there a day and time, and if not, there's consequences to that. We work with them. We try to get them there. So we do have people that, like I said, don't have licenses. They find ways to get there. And we work with them on how to do it. Addresses, I've been asked a handful of times to provide where the people reside that I work with. And I don't have a data system like the DA's office does to collect any of that information. But we do have people that their address is not correct with us. That might be where they were arrested, but then they move different addresses, but they still get mail at the initial address that they were arrested at. Our drug court participants are a classic example of that, where they reside in sober homes or the Department of Corrections has put them in a TLP. And then once or Salvation Army, and then they get moved, and do they update their address? Not necessarily. And so that's the difficulty with my department, is that we don't always know where we're residing. As long as they keep showing up for us, we don't get too fired up over it. So.
Thank you. Supervisor Peterson.
Thank you. You're talking about mostly, or have been talking about criminal cases. What about the other legal cases that come through? Where are they coming from?
I don't know. I don't have that data. And
Or what about those people?
I think that is another consideration that definitely warrants, consideration from this board. And I think as I indicate in my letter, there's a lot of other people that utilize the courthouse beyond just the criminal defendant. So this is maybe a piece of the picture that, the importance of is up to you all. But I would absolutely agree that there are other people that use the courthouse, and they're locations are not.
Anybody else? Executive Pavelski, can you stand up, please? Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Cousins. With all the dots that are represented on the offender list, how many actually, how often is a court appearance and how many are associated with ancillary services? You have any idea as far as that goes?
That's a really good question, and I think trying to explain how many different court dates in this graph would just add too much to it. I think that is data that I could provide, just as kind of best guess, when someone has a court date, more often than not, it's every 1 month to 3 months. A lot of times people also appear remotely, or they appear on behalf of their attorney, or their attorneys are just meeting without the defendant actually coming. So there are lots of court dates, but just counting those up isn't necessarily going to one-to-one indicate every trip that person would make to court. They're making certain dates, like their initial appearance, their plea hearing, their trial, but other court dates, they're not coming. So on average, I would say someone charged with a crime would come to court between 3 and maybe 3 and 6 times, maybe more, maybe less, depending on the case. So I think each dot would represent a number of trips, but saying, what the average would be is a hard question to answer.
The majority of that is court services, like when Andrea deals with a small minority, they report Salvation Army type stuff, potentially Health and Human Service or other counseling type services. So the majority on that representation, it's mostly 70% court appearances, 80%, 50%. You have any idea on that?
Put you on the spot.
Yeah. I would really hesitate to guess. I think answering that would probably require me to guess. I think maybe I can follow up and see if I can provide some more detail on that. Judge Baker's raising her hand.
So a long time ago in practically a different way, I gave a presentation as clerk of court on how many times people would come to court. And I think our DA is pretty close, but this was something that I actually did track. This is back like 2014. I'm gonna just guess at some numbers. But if you want to go back and look at the archives, you could probably see a video of me talking about it. In a family case, someone could come to court 5, 6 times in a family case. We have several hundred family cases filed every year. Could be 5 times, could be 6 times, could be more times. In a misdemeanor, that they're going to come to court at least 3 times. They might come to court as many as 6 or 7 times. Small claims case, they're going to come to court maybe twice, maybe 3 times. Once to file, once for the court appearance, and then once for like a garnishment or some sort of action to follow up later on. In a felony case, I'm going to respectfully disagree with our DA. I think it's probably a few more times. Maybe that's just I'm a little jaded because I took on so many cases from branch 2 that were products of the pandemic. And I saw cases where people were coming to court 12 times, 14 times, pretrial after pretrial after pretrial. So it really changes. It's really across the board. It depends on what kind of case it is. You can have a divorce where someone comes 3 times and they're done. But you have and then you look at the traffic cases. We have more traffic cases and forfeitures than anything else because that's the bulk of what comes before the court, but they only come once. So we have, hundreds, really actually thousands. I think right now, we just are at like 2,300 traffic cases and those people come to court once. So it's really different depending on what it is. And I think that it really comes back to our folks are going to come to the court where the people are located, where the most people are located. That's who's going to come to court because that's simply our population. So, it's not the factor that is going to turn things for you. I think it's one thing for you to consider. The other piece I'll say about this, and just following up with the comment that Andrea made with regards to folks that are in OWIs, which we have, hundreds of, and folks that are in treatment court, they predominantly do not have valid driver's licenses. All the OARs that we have, of which I'm sure you'd agree, we have hundreds of OARs operating without a valid driver's license. Those folks don't have driver's licenses, and I do take some personal issue with requiring people to go someplace that's in a car when they don't have a valid driver's license. I struggle with requiring people to do something that is illegal, and they don't have valid driver's licenses. We have hundreds and hundreds of people without valid driver's licenses. Is that the decision for you to make? Is that the turning point for you? I don't think so. I think it's just one more piece of information. And I think really what the graphs show, which I really appreciate, is the graphs show that our criminal defendants, my guess is if we were to do this for family court cases, it'd be exactly the same thing. They come from where people are located. The bulk of the population is located in Point. So I just wanted to add a little bit more dimension there.
Andrea had her hand up. You had a comment?
Well,
or-
see, I know there's been questions about how often people have to report to day report, pretrial, et cetera. So on average for our drug testing, for our day report program, people have to tend to come to our programs 4 times a month, give or take. Our pretrial OWI program and post kind of depends on the level of OWI. The lower levels, they probably come and test, 6 to 8, 10 times a month. And they also, if they're high level, very extremely rare cases that it's maybe about 16 times per month. Our drug court participants who have the highest level of treatment that we provide probably have to come see us about 10 times per week for different treatments, drug testing, court, those types of things. So it's about 6 to 10 times depending on how they're doing and where they are. So they have to come quite a bit to our location for treatment and so forth. And then they have to go see their DOC agent also on top of that.
Thank you. Supervisor Morrow, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just, because whenever you have the same argument now, this happens so many times. But do you see there being an impediment to probation and parole not being at the downtown location? And because when I think of it will be the benefit of a green site, to me would be everything. Probation and parole could move there, Health and Human Services could move there. You could have everything on one campus, and then you could build transportation services around that, almost like a Walmart always manages to build public transportation wherever it goes. Like, do you see a benefit to a green site just in that you could build its own infrastructure of absolutely everything and access roads, and you could have not just like probation paroles there, which you have to admit is a lot of visits for people that are on intensive supervision. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, that might be something outside of my competence level of being a prosecutor in terms of what the infrastructure might look like. I guess it is unusual that probation and parole is where it is. My experience traveling around the state and being in different courthouses, very often it's in the same building or it's nearby. So I think it is kind of unusual that it's by the DMV where it is. With respect to that site, I guess, I think as I indicated in my letter, there are pros and cons to each. And the idea of having that campus is the pro for the green site. I guess, these plans are in place and they're still kind of roughed out. I didn't really get into this too much. I didn't want to muddy the waters, but just, one example I had was in St. Croix County, the courthouse there is a 2-story structure. It's got everything, 4 branches, a jail, a sheriff's office. It's even got a lot where they have the impound. And that's on, I think, about a 10.5 acre site. And that has landscaping and a crazy amount of parking, like more parking than you could ever need.
Do they have social services?
That I'm not sure. There's a lot of government services. I'm not sure if social services is there or not. But I only raise that as an example of a courthouse where they fit a lot of stuff into a 10.5 acre site, including parking and even, like I said, a lot for a sheriff's office impound. So I don't know if that meets what's being proposed for the site here would allow all of that, or if that's only an option with the green site. I do see the argument very much that having all of these services in the same location has been.
Supervisor Honnold, Joan, did you have your
Yes, I
hand up?
just have a comment.
and it has to do with what I've been hearing from Washington's, and I can appreciate, Mr. Supervisor Strucker's point that, we have a lot of law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, you know, who are gonna be contributing to this project. But what I'm also hearing though is that, if we don't pay attention to some of the issues that poor people in our community face, affordable housing, you can't get into an apartment without $1,000 cash. I mean, how many people can put that up here? Affordable housing is going to be an issue here in the city, and it would be certainly an issue in green space unless we want to build in some low-income housing, the project. Transportation, I mean, I know that there are subsidized services in the community. And I think it's good we have that. But when you finish a doctor's appointment and you wait 2.5 hours for that free ride to come get you to take you home, you know, we got parents that are working who have court cases, kids who are in daycare or not. I just think that if we don't pay attention to the housing, the transportation, the accessibility for that income group, we're exacerbating critical problems in our own community. If we don't pay attention to keeping this thriving, that's just comment. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else for DA Cousins? If not, thank you, sir, and thank you for all your time and effort in your report.
Yeah, thank you, Jen, for the opportunity to talk to you. Like I said, I have a preference. I don't think there's necessarily a right choice and a wrong choice, but I think the only wrong choice would be once it's selected, not funding it. I think, like I said, it's gotta be done. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we'll move on from that into a couple of questions that have really been hanging out there related to economic impacts, and then also the idea of what could happen with this downtown area if a greenfield site were to be selected. And the county executive's office has been working really hard to put this information together. So John, we'll invite John up here. Let him kind of lead everyone down the path of everything that they've been up to. So with that, sir, we can turn it over to you.
Everybody. My supervisors, I'd like to pick up this fake $1,000 bill.
Little louder, John, back in the room.
I'd like all the county supervisors to pick up this fake $1,000 bill. You turn the next slide, please. Okay, we're looking at some of the economic impacts, of waiting. We're looking at about $165 million project. We're looking at about 6%, inflation. And take a look at that. That's a question mark. I can talk about that later. Even if it's 3% on an average, I'll tell you what that does. But 6% of 165 million comes out to almost $10 million. Divide that by 365 days, you get $27,000 a day. Divided by 25, that's each of you supervisors, comes out to $1,084 a day. That's where the $1,000 bill dollar comes from. Every day we wait for a decision to start building, we're basically taking this $1,000 bill and throwing it in the garbage. Imagine you guys getting up every morning, grabbing a $1,000 bill and throwing it in the garbage on your way to work. Now, say that's 3%. Okay, rip this $1,000 bill in half. Then you're only throwing $500 away, so it's still a lot of money. So our cost to wait is expensive. Let's take a look at what's happened in the history. Portage County, back in 2016, Venture Architects, we could build an $80 million project, which actually included the sheriff's office and the maintenance facility for the sheriff's department. Back in 2016, right now, this does not include the sheriff's office or the maintenance facility. So if we take 165 million minus the 80 million it was last year, back in 2016, we got an $85 million difference. That's over 7 years. If I divided by 7 years, comes up 12.14 million. That's $1,300 a day for each of you servants. So any of you supervisor who have been on that committee since 2016, you've been throwing $1,300 a day or more in the garbage every time you went to work this morning. That's what the cost of waiting has done for Portage County. It's expensive. So we need to make a decision. I've been with some of the poorest poor there are in the world for mission trips. I've also had the opportunity with being in some of the most executive suites that I've been privileged to be with. One thing I noticed about people who have money is they're pretty good at making money, but they're really, really good at not losing money. And Portage County has not been very good at losing money because of the opportunity cost that we've not been taking advantage of. Again, I'm not trying to put pressure on anybody, but this is just fact. The timely decision is warranted. Okay, so we had a question about the impacts of the moving of the county jail to a potential green site. There's 26,000 residents in the city. There's 47,000 residents out in the villages and towns. Some of the goals of this project were to secure the original location for the community-wide benefit, while also pursuing the most financially responsible path. Some of the things as far as the economic impacts, if you take a look at it in your packet last month, there was a survey that came out of the executive office as far as how much people in the government right now tend to go downtown or visit downtown or do an economic activity downtown. There's going to be 94 people in phase one that if we were to move to a green site, come out of the county employment and the courts. And we surveyed those 94 people. We got 76 respondents back. If you take a look at that survey, there's not a lot of people that work in the county buildings in the courthouse or the annex or the jail that really go downtown. There's not that much economic impact. You take a look at the results, that's what it'll show. Please go to slide 4. This is another example of some economic impacts. These are all the costs that we've spent over the years doing studies, architectural costs, to develop, or to try to understand whether we want to build new jail, new courts. It's almost $1 million over the past 18 years. So, are we going to spend money and apply it to what we're trying to do, or are we just going to push this can down the road? Pushing the can down the road costs a lot of money. So then try to take a look at what really would happen in case we would move the courts, the jail from downtown to a different site. I got in contact with a gentleman by the name of Dennis Lawrence. He's with North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. I proposed to him the problem. I found out that he's got a computer model. Basically, I gave him the information that we're doing a $165 million project. We're taking 94 employees. And I gave him the salaries of all the employees that we had, because I don't have the salaries of some of the court personnel because they are not Portage County employees. I gave him as many salaries as could. And he threw it into a model. And Dennis, I believe you're with us. Is that correct? Dennis said he would be online today, and I talked to him before the meeting, and he said he would be online. Might have to unmute yourself, Dennis.
Yeah, allow it.
Oh, sorry, be allowed me now.
Now you should be able to unmute.
You unmute now, Dennis?
No.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
All right, thank you. Technology is always fun, so I apologize for that. Yeah, as your county executive mentioned, I mean, basically what we did was sort of took a look at the sort of the economic impact using what economists call a input-output model. So basically, we sort of put the input was the information related to the number of jobs, kind of those salary rates of the folks that work there. And then we kind of took that, if it were to be removed from the county is kind of the economic unit that we looked at. If we take it out and reinsert it back into the county, I mean, basically we get a net zero. So really the question was, I mean, is there an overall economic impact to the county if we move it from one place to another within the county? And using kind of that model, it basically came up with a zero, that there is no overall negative impact and no real positive. It sort of is a net zero, if you will. Related a little bit to some of the spending, and I think John mentioned a little bit about the survey that was conducted. We also did an additional run looking at some spending. And I think the model, based on sort of the spending habits of 94 folks at those income levels, I think the spending was about 115,000 that was identified using that model for spending in the downtown from them on an annual basis. So really a very limited amount. And I think even if you're looking at a relocation within a 3 to 4 mile radius, that the bulk of that spending would still be maintained in that area just because of other options and the availability and sort of consistent spending patterns. So, I mean, that really was the simple thing that we were looking at, see if there was any detrimental impact to the county from a relocation like this, and there isn't.
Yes, we talked a little bit about, if you put full-time residents downtown, what does that do for an economic impact?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, as you look at really, I mean, a jail facility like that, I mean, takes up a certain amount of land. And I mean, really what you look for in community development is kind of the highest and best use. I mean, most of, I think, our downtowns are striving to bring residents to their communities. I mean, I think there was a mention of affordable housing and other types of housing. I think those are really the preferred uses in a downtown location. Those help provide consistent sales to those, downtown businesses and other uses. If you look around even our region, I mean, if you look at the Wausau community, I mean, they've been strong promoting of, kind of more residential development of their downtown. They're actually looking at relocating much of their county facilities to the airport area. So there's certainly trends looking at, wanting more residents in those urban areas.
Are there any other questions, county supervisors or?
From RSC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Executive Podolsky. Dennis, I have a couple of questions for you. Do you feel that you had all the data that you needed to actually conduct this study? Was the study actually done? Because I'm not hearing that there was conclusive data. It sounds to me like it's more just feeling right now. So I'm curious about the study, how it was done, and if you had the data that you needed.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, basically what we did is a very simple run in the model, if you will. I think it prints out a little 8 or 9 page report. Basically, what the report shows is we extracted 94 jobs with sort of the multiplier effect, and then we put them back in, and basically it comes out as a 0. I mean, that's basically the simple formula. I mean, the input-output model, I mean, using the county as the economic sort of building block, it's not I guess the most informative way to use the model. I mean, usually you're looking at, as an example, you're moving something from one county to another, and then you see the loss in one and the gain in the other. When it's really within that one geography, I mean, it's basically you take 94 out, you put 94 back in, and the general economic numbers kind of equal out. But there is a input-output report that was developed as part of that. But you could certainly do a much more detailed, I think there was on the screen, there are multiple studies that have been done over the years. You certainly, if you spent a lot of money, you could come up with more numbers, but again, it really comes down to sort of the pros and cons and how you're evaluating the project. I think you can either look at, straight monetary or fiscal, or you could look at a combination of a variety of factors. I think multiple speakers have talked about other connections and other criteria that might be valuable in the determination of, the siting as well. But yes, there is a simple report that was generated, but there certainly could be a much more complicated study completed.
One follow-up on that. Does the study, I mean, I guess in the future, since we're not actually doing this all in one go, we have multiple phases of this project. Does the study then kind of ignore the fact that Health and Human Services would also be moved to whatever the green site location would be, and how those jobs would impact downtown businesses as well? And I guess the deeper question I have is, yeah, Portage County jobs supporting downtown is going to be a factor, or it may be no factor at all, as you're indicating with a zero number. However, I think the greater economic impact that we should be looking at is having Portage County services downtown in this area, and all the people that it brings to the downtown area, and all the business that it brings to local restaurants, coffee shops, places, in this area, in this 1 mile radius. That doesn't only include the downtown, it also includes the gas stations around here. So people are stopping in and grabbing lunch or grabbing gas or coffee or whatever. So has that been looked at in any way, shape, or form?
As far as what we were asked to look at, we looked at a very singular project being kind of the jail relocation itself, none of the other additional kind of ancillary type uses or other departments or things like that. So no, that is not, at least in what we did, was not looked at.
Thank you, Dennis. And was the city consulted on any of this at all? Because I see them as a really valuable partner in this conversation. So I would love to have their input to it as well.
Yeah. And I think, obviously, the city, if the project does end up being within the city, they would be a definite player that you'd want to try to get input from them as well. I don't know if they've done any additional market assessment or anything like that, but you're right, that would be somebody to get some additional information from.
Thank you for taking my questions, Dennis. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Dennis, a couple more questions. Sorry.
Supervisor Weaver, you got a comment or?
I actually do, I think my question would be for the county executive. Recognizing that this study, if you want to call it a study, appears to be pretty limited in scope, in that it's premised upon the data of 94 employees of the county. Will we and the public be provided with this report that appears to have been generated?
You can, I can talk to Dennis, and get it to you if you want. I had him speak. I don't think we can get that to you, no problem.
Thanks.
Dennis, any other questions?
Supervisor Barry Chakowski. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dennis, Supervisor Chakowski here. Would, have we changed, the amount of people moving as the phases go on? Would the percentages of people using the downtown, for an economic driver, would that percentage change by a drastic amount?
Considering it's a pretty minor difference in terms of distance, I don't think we would see very substantial differences. I think you might, I mean, if we were able to, and what we had hoped to do and maybe a more, robust model would be able to kind of break the county into little sections so you could kind of identify the downtown and different neighborhoods and things like that. And then run the model, you might be able to pick up some of that nuance type thing. But when we're really using the county as the building block, I don't think we'd see much change with some of those other variables.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so I mean, basically what you're saying is the economic activity is basically moving from one place to the next. There is going to be a potential detriment from where it moves, but then it's basically picked up to wherever it moves to. Is that correct?
Yep, that's a good summary.
Also, there's been a kind of shift in information as far as that location to the center part of the county or based on driving distance. Can you comment a little bit on that survey or that data?
Sure. I mean, I did have a chance to kind of look at that briefly. I guess I can't say that I 100% understand exactly the methodology that they used in that analysis. I think what we did was just, which is another using kind of our ArcGIS system, looking at the county population and kind of using the current jail site and the kind of a generalized proposed jail site. If we do what we did was using an enrichment tool and kind of just looking at a 15-minute drive time from either of the locations. I think we pick up about 66% of the population at the current jail site, and it actually increases to about 70% or so at the location more to the east. But again, I mean, drive time of 15 is something that's subjective. I mean, maybe you'd want to use a different drive time, but that's kind of what we did, is just kind of trying to figure out a little bit of what the assessment was done in that information that I think was provided to the county.
Okay, any other questions?
Will that information sounds like information perhaps has been provided to you, but will it make its way to us?
And I just gave the information like a day or two ago, and so I just asked him that question. He just responded to that question because I knew it was fresh. So yeah, absolutely. Dennis, can you get that information to us?
Yep, the drive time information, I can provide that to you as well. Sure.
Yeah. Also the report, you mentioned that there's like a 6 to 8 day report. If you can send that to me so I can disperse it to the county supervisors, that would be great.
Yep.
And we'll try and get that on the website as well so that the public has it too. Okay. So, Supervisor Oki.
Just one comment on the model, like an input, output, usually the inputs, outputs. So to take a singular element in terms of employees, if I'm grasping the depth of this, makes this just a very singular impact and really is quite exciting because this model would be again plural. You would look at multiple inputs and then look at multiple, or you could look at multiple inputs and look at a singular output, but you rarely have a singular input that gives a singular output.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree that, I mean, what we have is a relatively rudimentary input-output model. I mean, it's what the state's Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation is our partner with kind of this software. There are definitely much more robust multi-input types of software that are out there that run input-output analysis. It's just that what we have available is kind of that more the beginner's level, if you will.
Okay, also talk to, real estate developers, Holly Lacray, Bill Veba, Peter Harris, Jeremiah Parker, getting their input as far as, again, making, if we were to go to the green site, what do we got to do to make the site that we would leave advantageous? lessen the impacts, that would happen if they would move. Basically, the information that comes from them is that prime real estate close to the river could be used for multi-family housing or apartment complexes. Either would drive more economic activity downtown than the current Portage jail. Walking paths and bike paths tying into the area with feature sites along the river is very desirable. Plus, creating a larger tax base. Redevelopment risks are considered that the Orange State Committee regulations costs can increase the cost potential delays. That could decrease interest in the site. Discussions we had with Randy Pfeiffer from the city of Wausau, he's the economic development manager. And, he basically, what they've done in Wausau is do a Life River project where they put some multi-family housing in downtown area. They expected it to be full in 18 months. It was full in 9 months. They're actually increasing their project. Things are going well, for them. According to him, housing demand is continuing to grow and it has potential. And along with that, I got in contact with a developer, with a gentleman by the name of Tim Schertz, and went from talking to him, he's kind of got a assessment method where he takes a look at the financial, physical, and functional relationship of taking a look at two sites and comparing them. And he determines which site would be more preferential. He also he likes adaptive reuse, where he likes to use buildings over and not destroy them. So with that, Tim, if you would like to come up and kind of explain some of the experience you had. Tim has been in the it's been developed and done over 30 projects in the central Wisconsin area. He's been in the business for over 2 decades. He's been an appraiser for over 10 years. Thank you.
How are we tonight? Just a word that's came out of this conversation. I remember when the all-in project was 64 million.
Yeah.
That's how long this has been going on. The all-in project used to be 64. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, how are we gonna deal with $64 million to build the jail? Look where we are today. Now it's over 3 times that. So a little bit about my history. In the downtown area alone, over the past, not 2 decades, but 3, I've purchased 18 buildings. And I seem to see value in stuff that's everyone else wants to tear down. So those 18 buildings that I purchased were turned into 75,000 square feet of office space and light commercial and 27,000 feet of residential living.
Excuse me, introduce yourself again. I didn't catch.
Okay,
You are what?
Tim Schertz.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So I've spent a lot of time in the area that we're talking about, more than half my life. I want to make it clear that I am not representing the Association of Downtown Businesses, because I think they're on the other side of this issue based upon the conversations that I've had with some of the business owners. I will make this clear, as the district attorney did. He gave his feeling of what he thought should happen. And I wasn't going to do that in this conversation, but I'm going to start with that right now, so you see what side of the fence I'm on when the conversations start to take place about what we should do with the downtown and where we think it's going. I am not an advocate of abandoning the annex in any way, shape, or form. That is a good building. There's 25 to 40 years of use left on it, and I see no reason to abandon it. I believe that we can adaptively reuse a portion of the jail, maybe not all of it, but some of it. And I believe that we can adaptively reuse the areas within the current courthouse for office facilities within the county. I am never an advocate of tearing something down and starting over when we have buildings that we can use and we can remodel to make work. I am not an advocate of keeping the jail downtown. Why would we take some of the best development land that we have left in the core downtown on waterfront and build a concrete box with barbed wire around it. Maybe thinking of us losing employees is a very valid concern for the downtown. But my thought is, let's take that 94 number and make that 125 or 150. The remaining land that's left around there, through the city, develop properly with light commercial and residential, as you see happening in the downtown right now, will increase that number 4 or 5-fold with people that live within the district, not come to work part-time, but live there permanent. And also in that residential development, we can account for some of the low-income housing that we have spoke of, just as Wausau has done in their riverfront development. So I do understand, Bob Gifford, that there is a concern about wanting to make it easy for people to get to the jail. And I can understand why that can be a concern, but we do have a public transportation system in this community, and you're gonna need to become an adult eventually, so you're gonna have to figure out how to get there. And for us spending any time about making it convenient for people to use services, we are in the most wired communicative world in history, in the history of mankind. You can figure out a way with your iPhone, you can find a service, you can find the help, you can find the things we need. You need to get to your appointments. I find it really interesting as well that probation and parole is nowhere near the jail. They seem to get there every day, don't they? Not an issue. So with that being the case, I do see value in making a campus where probation and parole, human services, the jail, the sheriff's department, all of that is located within the center of the county. And all of that has easy access via the highway. I think we'll all agree that we can't keep spending $950,000 a year to transport prisoners.
Yeah, it's roughly 700 some thousand this year.
Okay, seven to 900,000 a year. We can't continue to spend that money in transporting prisoners to other areas. So we're gonna have to make a decision now. And, I'll give Dennis credit for his study, but I think the administrator said it best. We gotta stop relying on studies, people. We gotta start using our common sense. What is best for our community? Because one side can produce a study that has an outcome of this decision, and the other side can produce an outcome with a study that gives you a completely different picture. So studies aren't the answer. Common sense is the answer. And common sense says that a campus, not a complete government campus, but a campus that helps the district attorney, helps the sheriff's department, helps the jail deal with that population that needs services is a much smarter answer. But short of developing a campus that encompasses everything and sends everything under one roof, when we have perfectly good buildings that we can still maintain and we can still use for decades to come. That money does not need to be spent. Now, knowing that all of the land out behind us here is some of the best land that we have to develop, I can't see it left in the downtown. I can't see an argument for wanting to keep that governmental services when we have a package right now that's been presented, from what I can tell financially, that is actually cheaper for the county to move to a green site as opposed to stay downtown. I think that we need to be stewards of the taxpayers' money and do what's most financially feasible. So go ahead, Stab. Anytime you want to ask a question, ask.
Clarification.
Mr. Soik, Supervisor Soik, go ahead.
Yep, thank
I
you.
want it so that the people at home are recognize who it is.
It's just a clarification. It's the sheriff's
I want
office.
to make sure that the people at home know who is speaking, so.
Yep, it's sheriff's office, not department. He gets a little.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right, sheriff's office.
sorry.
I was like a slack.
I don't, you didn't have the terminology back.
Supervisor Splinter, then Supervisor.
As long as you brought it up, the differential that we've been given, and the numbers have not changed, because I got a packet for tomorrow's Space and Properties Committee meeting that has the same numbers. We're talking over the next 15 years, a greenfield site of 290 million over until completion of 2042, at least according to our experts, and 395 million if we, for the same exact thing downtown, for a differential of $105 million of our taxpayers' money over the next, through 2042, which will be probably my kids and my grandkids, and I probably will get out of the taxes by 2042. But $105 million difference. That's the elephant in the room. And whatever you're thinking on the downtown, is it worth $105 million more to throw it away for exactly the same square footage of the courthouse, exactly the same number of jail cells, and exactly the same number of parking spots? It just does not make it, like you said, it's common sense. I've never bought anything over $30,000. But when you break it down and you look at it on a common sense point of view, and you want to save and be good stewards of our people's money, that $105 million can go towards something else that would benefit. We could have a countywide transportation system where, in 20 years, we could have vans going around the county picking up people for nothing.
I can take
using that $105 million.
I can take that one step further. I can take that one step further than where you were. In the appraisal world, which is a life of mine a long time ago, but, I've been in Marathon, Portage, and Wood County, probably 17,000 homes and commercial buildings. We look at something in that world called highest and best use. What's the highest and best use of the property that you're examining or you're evaluating at this point in time? That $100 million is one number, but the number to the city of Stevens Point is another number. That would be the increased tax base of using the highest and best use of the property, as opposed to putting a debit on the books, which is a government building. So we're taking some of the best land for development, and we're putting a government building on it, which will never put any money in the coffers of Stevens Point, under the argument that we're going to keep 150 extra employees downtown because we don't move it out to a green site on the edge of a highway. Okay, but how much money did we take out of Stevens Point's coffers by not developing the land to its highest and best use immediately along the river? That number I don't know, but that number can be calculated.
So I guess, we're getting into some uncharted water here between, public comment, or you were part of John's presentation as a specific.
All right, so I'll continue then. At the end of the highest and best use, yeah, I'm gonna wrap it.
I'd like, to wrap it up.
The highest and best use was really the decision for everybody to make here. What's the highest and best use of the property? And functionally, can we rehabilitate, for lack of a better term, the buildings that we have to save the county money, to be able to put some of the services in there permanently or temporarily? And then financially, what's the best move for the county?
Thank you, sir.
Did you have a question?
Stan, Supervisor Pataki.
Just for the information of the county board and the citizens, back before we built this present jail, we were in the old Portage garage. And there we had probation and parole that was stationed there with us. They had their offices there. It was advantageous to both the sheriff's department and probation and parole to be together. We worked very closely together.
And I'm not gonna mention some of the things that he did. However, if anybody, any supervisor has a question, I will meet with you and just tell you the advantages of having probation and parole and the sheriff's department together. And thank you.
Supervisor Laddick.
About one question, our field bear with 1039. We bought that, I think, 5 years ago for $1 million. Probably not the best idea to tear that down to make room for, I could find better uses for that, do you think?
Absolutely. So over here we have, let's see your hand, Supervisor Weaver.
Thank you. I just have a few comments to make. I think the need to have accurate information is paramount. I'm surprised that we're hearing this $105 million number come up again. This was a discussion that we had at the last board meeting, and perhaps Mr. Van Clee from Tegra needs to reiterate what he said before, but it's not accurate to be stating that there is a $105 million cost difference. The other comment that I have is it seems as if we have gone in the direction of having some discussion at the county level about, I guess I'd call it a philosophy as to what the best sort of use or development ideas would be for downtown Stevens Point. We've had some discussions with a real estate developer, and from the executive's discussion, apparently we've even gone to the city of Wausau. What strikes me as perplexing is that I think that we've got somebody missing from the discussion, which is the city of Stevens Point. And I would think that they would be a necessary part of any discussion on that topic.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Supervisor Marissa, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I keep hearing about probation and parole. I think it's great to discuss it. It's kind of off track, but have they been consulted about being in our new building or part of the new building, whether it's in the downtown or the Greenfield site? Because yeah, I mean, there's another essential partner to have.
From these talks and discussions, I did not realize that they were over there behind the Tegra building, so, and I don't think probably a lot of other people realized it as well. It's just not something I was involved with.
And then just in regards to Executive Pavelski, he referenced maps that were shared with him from a citizen. I believe you're talking about, and then Dennis not knowing the model and what model was used to generate those maps. They were distance maps based on the roads here in Portage County. And if the executive or any of the board wanted to discuss those, but the author and the generator of those maps are here to discuss his methods. So it's, if you wanted to do that and we had questions on it, we do have the person who generated those maps here and present tonight, so they can discuss those and the methodology used behind them. So just a point of clarification. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just have a quick comment. I want to thank both Tim and Mr. Pavelski for their opinions as best as I can tell. But what I don't understand is, besides a piece of monopoly money in an 8th grade math lesson and a study that basically says 94 minus 94 plus 94 equals 94, what information in the last half an hour actually addresses questions 17 and 18 in this packet? I don't fully understand that, and maybe I missed a nuance somewhere. But I just wanted to point out that this in no way is actually what we were talking about in these two particular numbers. It's all good stuff that we need to talk about. These are all good opinions to hear, but none of it is relevant to these two questions.
Economic impact. No, by waiting, there is an economic impact. Made that point pretty clear. That's relevant. Dennis Lawrence's initial survey, and basically if you move from one site to the next, yeah, you're gonna have detriments here, but you're gonna pick up those detriments over here. If they're gonna eat lunch here, they're gonna eat lunch over here. So that's basically, yeah, it's a net zero. You can go into a great big detailed study. My past experience, when I talk to experts, guys who are in the field, who are doing it, That's how decisions get made. Spend a lot of money on expensive surveys. Again, I've seen surveys tell me one thing based on how they want the survey to come out, just like Dennis explained. Now, also at the standpoint of, there was a question for, what do we do as far as for economic development if we were to move out? That's why I'm answering the questions that supervisors had. And so I'm giving you the information that there's questions out there. Here's what we can do. Put in multi-housing. We can put in some retail space, which Tim's gonna get into here a little bit shortly. It's just ideas out there, because there's this idea that all of a sudden, if the county moves out of here, oh, woe is me, the downtown's gonna collapse. No, that's not the way it happens. If you really have, I've worked with people who make things happen. They dream and they get it done. So I want to leave you with that kind of opportunity. And also, I'll go through another slide here shortly. That, we're basically trying to build on 6 acres of space. I'll go over that shortly. But I'm answering the questions that basically came back to me. And I don't think you guys realize how much money that actually the county is wasting. And, the judges have said there's a decision needs to be done. I think it's pretty relevant. The decision has to be done, but also giving you all the facts, the advantages and the disadvantages, and how to solve those advantages or the disadvantages on both sides. I'm just trying to broaden your spectrum and realize what can be done.
Okay, I appreciate your second attempt at the same insight.
So I want to just remind everybody that I gave this a hard stop at 8 o'clock, so I want to keep things moving and move on. Supervisor Medine had his hand up.
We hired PWBR, say 4 years ago. First thing they came in with was a really nice rendition how the pinnacle of a new architectural vision for the community would be. So they showed how the county buildings would be the impetus for that. I should have brought that along and showed that, because that's what the planners at PWBR showed us in this room, the very first public meeting that we had. So it's not as if we're putting in
a box of
junk, get it somewhere else out of our really nice place here. They showed us that this was going to be the pinnacle for a new vision for architecture. And because we've got some vision for architecture in the Century Building and that sort of thing in this downtown area, the lighting and all of that. And we tend to forget about that we think that, well, this is just kind of we just kind of throw a building, county building, and keep it fairly inexpensive as long as it does the job, and so just put that out somewhere else. That's what they came in with at first, just so you know that it was the highest and best use from their perspective when they first came in, was to have this group of buildings be the pinnacle for the future for this county. All right, just wanted to let you know that, and I'll dig that out. But Don will remember that, and Jeannie's going to sure. Yeah, also, we were impressed with that. We left that alone, I guess, 3 years ago because we thought that money was a big deal. Secondly, you talked about putting the institutions together, and then everything is fine. Well, the institutions that we have control over are pretty much inmates and people that we have strict sanctions over. So we could put them in a grouping. I think that's what everybody is describing. And matter of fact, when I asked the question to Tegra at first, who are we dealing with? Are we dealing with just the inmates, or are we dealing with the hundreds of people that are sanctioned? And he said, well, we're just dealing with inmates. That was about the only question I got as a Space and Properties Committee member during that whole year. But we've got the whole continuum in this area. And in this area, we've got the whole continuum sanctioned facility. It's the only area in the county that we could actually continue with that full continuum. if we fracture that by having some of the continuum of sanctioned facilities here and some of it elsewhere, I think that can fracture that whole thing. We've got lots of sanctioned facilities in this area, and they're gonna stay in this area. And we ought to be able to encourage those people to be reintegrated in that community with the full continuum. I just want to make sure that everybody knows what that continuum is, so we're not just talking about inmates, all right? We've got the halfway house, which is the county owns, and it's right over here. You're not going to get something like that out in a new area. At least it won't be welcomed out in that area out there. We got the Family Crisis Center, we got the state operated sex offender house, which is a halfway house, which is a half a block that way. We've got the Youth Enrichment Center, which is downtown for the young people that are in and out of the juvenile system in that building. We've got 2 short-term drug and alcohol recovery residents, Riverside for men and River Point for women. We've got this whole continuum in this area, and it works quite well that people can shift in and out. And by the way, the sheriff's department has been a lot of those residents, and I presume they were not the first call, but they're the ones who have been there to take care of a lot of those issues, particularly since we own the one building right here. We have primary responsibility for it, not the police department. All in all, I think that we have a very good continuum in this area. And if you're talking about putting the sanctioned facilities in one group, this is the only place it's going to work. This is the only place it's going to work.
Andrea?
One thing I will comment about Portage House is that the primary response is not through the sheriff's office, it's through the Stevens Point Police Department, who do come over there. Our sober living rarely has police presence there. I would argue, unless the sheriff has a different answer, but it would obviously be the Stevens Point Police Department that would respond to that. But our sober living is independently owned, has nothing to do with county. It's independently owned, and they are people that are working on their sobriety. There are struggles there, but rarely do when I speak with some of the people that are on the board there or that do reside there, people understand that there's law enforcement that come there often.
All I'm saying is that the people that I'm aware of that are neighbors have seen to be the county squad at both the buildings. Or the neighbors told me that.
No responder, Dave.
It'd be Stevens Point Police Department if it was.
Well, I'm just saying it might have been at a larger,
Please direct your comments to the chair. I believe Mr. Peterson.
Thank you. We hear this doom and gloom if they would leave. I don't know how many years ago it's been since the mall has left the city of Stevens Point. But, that's been repositioned and it looks like that's quite thriving. Wouldn't the same thing possibly happen if this center did move out? This is a kind of a comment or a thought.
Thank you. Supervisor Pavelski, are we, I want to just make sure we keep moving through because we've got almost two questions answered, so.
Thank you so much, Tim. Appreciate it. Thanks for letting you. Last little presentation we got is by Director Tim Reed with Planning and Zoning. And you asked for some potential abilities to redevelop the downtown area. Tim's just got a couple of suggestions that he didn't know where to some people on.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Executive Kozlowski, and I know some of the points have been made, so I'm not gonna. I'll just kind of go through quick what I had put together here, and this is my first slide, just talking about pros. The selection of a green site in the county. I just want to encourage everybody to think of it as the selection of a green site is what I was asked to talk on. So that's where I'm prefacing my remarks. Okay. It's not that I'm advocating one or another, but the green site itself doesn't have to be looked at as a negative. It can be looked at as an economic opportunity for the downtown. And if we approach it that way, opportunities to relocate undesirable and incompatible uses on a county scale don't happen very often. Some of that was mentioned by other speakers here and other supervisors tonight. The amount of acreage that would become available in the proximity to the downtown is unique. We've talked about higher and better uses here tonight already. Higher and better uses than the jail can be developed to complement the downtown and solve a number of issues. The jail proximity to the local church here, the school, and located in the floodplain. These are all concerns. Do we really want to be doing that with the jail in the future when we have this opportunity before us? If people and businesses are opportunities that we're looking for, and we want to help the downtown, that adding people and complementary businesses should be what we are focusing on. Okay, so those are some of the pros as an opportunity. Okay, the next slide, please. So the cons to economic development, we do need to work with the city. The county acknowledges that there will be a period of 2 to 5 years where new development to fully be realized. Okay, so if something is coming in and we're phasing out, I mean, we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge the impact on the city and work with the city in terms of that if the supervisors were to choose a green site and move out of the area. The effect of the economic development that we're talking about isn't going to be immediate. I think we have to be realistic about that as we talk through this and come up with the best solution. We'll go on to the next slide here. And we'll go over some actual discussions of alternative development. And we move it up. Okay, so we've got Arlington Place and Water Street. And what I want to point out here, and as was pointed out by previous speakers, is that this is an opportunity here. This is the annex here. So maintaining the annex from either office buildings for us or transitioning it into something else, that building is still there. And I think that was a great point that was brought up in terms of repurposing. And then just get into a little bit more of this, but speaking of repurposing, this is the 1039 building up in this area. And that, you know, the city is looking for incubator opportunities. That's would seem to lend itself to be a very good location with proximity to downtown being right there. And then so that's your commercial, and then the other opportunity that could happen there is new residential development to bring residents down. So in one picture, essentially, in one idea on just this particular location, we're not even considering all, the rest of the facilities in that. We have residential development, we have economic development, we have repurposing of buildings. These are everything that you've discussed here tonight, and these are at least ideas to consider. If you choose a green site, there are opportunities here to work with the city and put other things in place. Another thing that I want to mention, and then we'll kind of go through some of the slides, because I know time is getting a little tight. But you do have the proximity to the water. You have the green space here, the views that this would be afforded with a potential phase development with that residential area. It's something that's being done in other areas right here in the city. The examples would be Berkshire and Northside. So this kind of development has already happened. We can kind of start going through the slides here then. That's just an aerial view there. Again, remember with the trail system here, the connectivity of the trail system that we have in the city. And there's the rest of the campus. Next slide, please. In more views. Next slide, please. Next slide. And then this here is going to be just kind of and you have this in your package, but there's office space and then other spaces for tenants, etc. The idea behind this is that we can repurpose the building. I mean, phased residential development is around this area to be complementary. And then if I could can I go back just one? I got ahead of myself here just a little bit. But on this building here, for the residential development, a number of things can happen. Parking, you've been talking about parking, and that's been an issue. So what happens with the parking if you bring more residents down? A number of things that are happening with the Berkshire and Landside that I talked about before is they're putting commercial development retail development underneath those residential areas. You could put parking underneath these areas, but you could solve some of that problem as well. The point is that, this is just one idea. There are other things that could be done with these sites. Okay, if I can go all the way to my last slide here. Yeah. Up a little bit, yeah. So this, in summary, is the trouble really isn't that the county is considering the possibility of a green site. I think that it's responsible to do that. You need to be able to make decisions based off of 2 plans that are developed so that you can make the best decision and be responsible taxpayer dollars. The real problem is that we don't have a plan for when we vacate this particular area, if that's what you choose to do. And so we need to work with the city again in order to be able to do that. Many businesses have already left the downtown. So the county may be the next one, but it doesn't mean that alternatives don't exist. I know I kind of went through that a little quick, and I know you're getting crunched for time. Any questions?
Oh, Supervisor Morrissey.
I just have a point of clarification. In the beginning, you said that you were just asked to present on the pros of a green site and what that would mean for economic development and some possibilities.
If that were chosen, yes, that was what I was
Were
asking.
you asked to do that?
No, that was other speakers.
Okay. And then I just want to point out some really sweet irony right here. I have the utmost respect for our 2 planning officials in our county, Mr. Tim Reed and Mr. Ryan Karnowski, because they are doing some heavy lifting in our county. But in the past week, I have seen a plan by Mr. Karnowski and a plan by Mr. Tim Reed, Tim doing the city's business and Ryan doing the county's business because their leaders have told them to do this. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if we could get our county and city leaders to actually work together so their employees could do their own damn jobs? I mean, how awesome would that be? Because I got the plan here from Ryan and I got the plan there from Tim, but neither of them work for those organizations. Yet we're telling each other what we should be doing. Do you know how bad that sounds? How many of you like it when your husband or wife tells you what you should do? This is what we have happening right now. We have a husband and a wife telling each other what they should do with their own property, yet they refuse to sit down together and make a good decision for our county and city. The kids are gonna be all right, but there needs to be some conscious uncoupling of these 2 entities so we can do good work together and not have the drama of telling each other what to do all the time. It's just sweet. I just want to tell you that, you guys, because I really, really, really respect both of you so much.
I've had about a half-hour phone conversation with Mr. Kanowski. I was in his office and I've talked to him on several different occasions. And we have talked about different things. So there is obviously some communication, but as I told Mr. Kanowski, as soon as I have a direction, I will be talking with the city to go over what the wishes of this board is in the direction of this board. Mr. Karnowski. We're talking about you, might as well let you talk.
Everybody else is, thank you. Well, there's a number of kind of initial reactions to Mr. Pavelski's presentation. And Dennis and his team at Regional Plan Commission are just some real rock stars. And so I have a lot of respect for what they do. But I think it's a disservice to say that X number of dollars out of downtown will equal X number of dollars in, let's say, Crossroads Commons as an example. Because not every dollar that's spent in Crossroads Commons stays local, as opposed to downtown where the majority of those dollars stay local. Those are like real economic impact studies that again, the city offered to pay for half of a full study to really get a better understanding of what a relocation of your facilities out of downtown would look like. And unfortunately, that was not accepted by the county's administration. Second of all, I hear a lot of comments about highest and best use. I think planners in general can agree that a jail is like the lowest use ever that exists next to like an iron smelting plant, right? I mean, nobody wants to be adjacent to that specific type of use and that specific type of facility. But what's often, and what I've heard tonight, is that nobody's talking about the highest and best use for East Park Commerce Center. It's not a non-taxable entity like the county. The city has made very strategic acquisitions, very strategic investments in that specific area for job creation, job growth. The second highest assessed value property is Lineage Logistics, located in East Park Commerce Center. They're the second highest property tax paying entity in the city of Stevens Point. And I've got to assume pretty high up there for Portage County as well. If we want to attract more businesses like that, putting them in East Park Commerce Center makes the most sense. Making sure that we have land that's readily available for employment growth, economic diversification is going to be really critical as we move forward. Jails are awful. We don't know where to put them. Nobody wants them next door to them. But at least this area and this downtown site specifically has dealt with it for the last 155 years, and they know what to expect. And so I think your economic impact study and your economic development slides really don't hold any bearing to the city of Stevens Point. And with all due respect to my counterpart, Mr. Reed, the drawings you put together are really nice. I was a practitioner of economic development for Stevens Point. I can tell you that I have seen a number of projects that have really pretty pictures, but never come to fruition because of financial reasons. 2 to 5 years for redevelopment of this site once the county vacates is exceptionally impressive. I think a good example that we have right here in Stevens Point is the former Lullaby Furniture site. 1997 is ultimately when the city either acquired or began the process of acquisition. We didn't get that project in the ground until 2020. And there were probably a half dozen times where the city put RFPs up. We tried to get something going. We just couldn't get the financials to go with it. And so, you are probably looking at a 15 to 17 year turnaround for a project. Mixed use buildings are really pretty and they are really nice additions to communities in their downtown areas. But as I've talked to county administration previously, having diversity in your visitors downtown, in your employment downtown is more impactful than a bunch of mixed use buildings that may not be fully occupied. We're struggling to fill the north side yard tenant spaces. And there's no coincidence in that. I mean, it's expensive to build those buildings and those developers expect a specific dollar per square foot. I don't expect this to be any different in this part of the community. So city's always been open. Again, that's the first time I've seen Mr. Reed's, or it wasn't Mr. Reed specifically, but they're really nice drawings. The city, Mr. Baresi, I totally agree. I'm tired of doing the county's business. I can send you a bill if you like. But I'd like to again sit down and have a conversation. Previously, I know we met earlier this week, and unfortunately, I don't know if those conversations were as fruitful as either side.
Supervisor Soik. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask you or Jim Reed, you may not know him, he's new to the area, but for some in the room that are much older than I, is this property that we're sitting on right now as polluted and contaminated as the Lullaby site was?
Can't answer that.
Okay, thank you. This isn't? Okay. Thank you.
Let's keep moving then. Thank you, sir.
Answer to Supervisor Baresi's question, I mean, we've had architects study this whole thing on the site. If the city had considerations and wanted to bring them forth, they didn't have to do our job. BWBR did the job for you. We studied this, came up with the best configuration for the downtown site. If the city has any considerations, they're welcome to bring them forth. And they made some comments, but again, if there is a consideration to move to a green site, then we're also asking them to what's going to happen at that time. If that's a possibility, and not just what you're saying, no, we're not going to consider that, because that is a possibility. So let's come together and talk. If you don't want to talk as if that's a possibility, that gets difficult. So then we have to present something to you. This is what the possibility is, because that's not coming from them at this point.
Can I just ask a question, executive, please? I'll get us right. Yep. I'm hearing you say they don't want to talk. I'm hearing them say that you don't want to talk. So who's lying in this? Right? Like, get over yourselves, sit down at the table and work it out. This is our partner, our county seat partner. If you don't like them, fine, move it to Plover. I know that's the long game here, but sit down and work it out. I am honestly like totally sick of each side saying that they're not going to talk to each other or the other one won't talk. So who's BSing? I don't get it, Mr. Pavelski. I also don't get why, we have a University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point that have urban geographers, regional economists, statisticians, people who do this work, and they haven't been consulted. And the reason I know is because I reached out to them myself, and they're drooling at the opportunity to look at the dynamics in this area. They actually already ran the numbers for the healthcare center prior to us building our building when they heard about the referendum, just as like a fun project for class. They predicted our exact outcome before we knew it. Why? Because they're the smartest people in the room. Why have we not accessed these people? This is what I'm trying to figure out here. The county, I appreciate the work that's been done. Mr. Jankowski, you've been meeting after meeting after meeting. I did the same thing with the healthcare center. It is a lot of work and it's thankless, right? But we do our work. And I appreciate the work that BWR is doing and all the team and the finance folks. And we're doing that work, but we're not using the resources we have available to us, in my opinion. They're here. They might even be in Companies Room 5, I don't know, but they are waiting for the opportunity to come up and say, yeah, we can run this. We can run these numbers on economic impact, and they'll probably predict it down to, last decimal point.
I had heard no word from any of those resources. If they were really drooling at it, why weren't they contacting my office? This has been going on.
That's your job, sir.
This has been going for 15 years. So, again, if they got some considerations, as soon as this came up, some people should make you contact, or if you had some ideas, why aren't you giving those ideas to me and I'll be happy to run with them.
Consider them presented.
Okay, next slide. 50, next economic development. Yeah, it's all about location, location, location. That's what we're discussing here today. When you talk about economic development, it's all about location. Where you want something best use. Next slide, please. If they go to the picture, this is what we're looking at. This area is what we can build upon. Can't move the ADRC. It's a totally functional building, doing exactly what it should do. It's total complement of the community. Can't move the current LEC or the jail or the sheriff's office, because it has to be used. So we got 6 acres to build upon. That's a very limited site for all the stuff we have to put on over there. One comment I want to make is that the city if someone kept this property back, they're willing to work with us on this property, but they said it is a beautiful property that has access to Riverview. They're looking at potentially putting opportunity of a apartment complex or a housing complex over here, which would be great. Then you put a jail over here, but you want to be looking at a river on one side, looking at a jail on the next. Again, better use. Jail does not promote economic development for downtown site. Again, there's a lot of considerations to be done, but there's also consideration that people are bringing up to me. There are some residents from downtown. That's all I have to say at this point. If there's any other questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you. Bruce, did you want to, you guys want to start heading up here? So, couple more questions, and we've touched on this a little bit. Brett Moreski brought it up about coordination between the county and the city. Wanted to let everyone know that on the 4th of April, there was a follow-up meeting with the city. So we do continue to discuss how we can work together. The good that came out of that meeting is that the city is generally agreeable to the request from the county, from the letter that the county executive put together, I don't know, a few weeks ago. It was in the packet last time, with one exception. That was that riverfront property that the county executive was saying they were lukewarm, but open to discussions if we really needed that property to make campus come together if downtown is selected as the viable location. And then the next item that we've asked the design team to address, broad picture, not specific, but it's the idea that is there a different way that we should be using the downtown site? And again, there were some references to a sketch or a letter that the city had put together. Not specifically concerned in those details, but we want to discuss in general to remind people how we ended up with what we ended up. So.
All right, we look forward a few slides here. We're actually not quite there yet.
Yep, keep going. This was still at the end of counter executives. There you go. That's where we'll start.
Perfect. All right, good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. We are your architects. There's been a lot of reference to the that's okay. This is a complicated project. Dedicated my career to it, Dwayne's dedicated his career to it. My name is Bruce Armswhite. I'm with Dewberry. Dwayne Jones with BWBR. We have been teammates on this effort for 5 years. So what I'm here to kind of put into clarity, I hope, are a couple things that we're losing sight of just a little bit here. This is a diagram that there will be at least some of the supervisors that recognize that this is something that the county went through actually another project recently. And what was really good about it is that it makes it super clear. We're not to design yet. Does anybody realize that? We're not designing it. Master planning process is a time where we listen, we gather information. We write a recipe card that's 60 or 70 pages long for every little space that's going to be in the building, for each department, for each function, right? And then we use that to start quantifying block diagrams. Yeah, we're right here. We're in this pre-design phase, okay? And that's necessary. And with all the big questions on the table, we've used that process to quantify a couple of really important things. We've quantified what the scope of the project really is. We've been able to use that with construction managers that are professional and understand the market to look at what that is going to cost, to apply the project costs, not just the bid costs that you may hear in the newspaper, but the actual project costs that have all the other development pieces that are needed to actually get this done. Okay. What we're trying to do is get ourselves to that point where now we understand project scope, and we've been able to have really good discussions and really good financial studies about how can we tackle this thing, right? You've heard us talk about a master plan for all of these spaces, and then you've heard us make a recommendation for what phase one is. We have a strong consensus, I think, of everybody in this room that the top priorities are courts and jail. Period. Okay, what's that going to cost? Okay, we've got that quantified with a range. Mike's going to talk more about this later, and Jenny and others. So just want to remind everybody that's kind of where we're at. So go to the next slide. Just kind of keep working with that. So what I think is important that everyone remembers is that this master planning process is not been a linear path to get to one solution where the courts is, over there, and the jail's over there, or why isn't it over here? We've gone through and done site test fits, and here's a dozen of them, and each of those have about 3 or 4 or 8 behind them to get to each of those questions so that we can evaluate that together, okay? That has led us led us to a path where we were able to take a look at the actual concept blocks that are used to put a building together, spaces that it takes. And so anyway, we'll go to the next slide, and then I can kind of just give you an overview of where we're at in this process. And all this is done, again, is to quantify how big is the bread box, all right? How much is it going to cost? And then guess at when we're going to be able to bid it 2 years from now, for instance. Try to get to that point where you guys know, can we afford it? How much can we afford? We've got to that point. We're at that point. Now, whether these pieces move around, I can guarantee you from every project, they're going to move around at least a little bit. They may be pretty close to this. They may not. They may be on a greenfield site. Obviously, we're talking about that. But what I wanted to just kind of refresh everybody on is the reasons why we've come to this point in this process. And just to remind everybody that these are blocks of space, and they're stacked up, and there's concept diagrams, block diagramming, right, to support why this looks like this shape. There's not detailed design. This is a complicated animal that needs a decision now, right? So what this was based on is a couple of fundamentals that go back many years. I was here in 2003 and 4 as an architect with another firm, by the way, and did one of the studies on the law enforcement center and jail topic. 20 years later, I'm back because this is what I do, and I'm really hoping to get to this point. We took another look at the law enforcement center building when Barry and BWBR came together as a team to help you guys again. And what it showed was crystal clear, something I can tell you with all confidence. It does not pencil out in anybody's common sense or financial numbers or the future of law enforcement or the best practices today. Plan on using that law enforcement center for the future of this county. It doesn't, guys. All right. So that was one of the parameters of planning, is that, by the way, that's not going to get remodeled. It's not going to get added on to. Okay. Can we revisit that? Well, good. But it's been beat to death for 20 years, guys. 20 years. All right. The reality is, when you take off the jail part of that, you've lost over half the building. You're trying to save something that is a chassis that doesn't fit the new car. Okay? All it's going to do is be a tripping hazard for the sheriff for the next 30 years. So that's that, right? All right, so eventually that's going away. That's framework number one. Every option that we look at, we have to have a way to expand in the future. That expansion hopefully is going to be horizontally, might be on top of a part of the building. Those are all doable and they're all viable. But some of the things that you're noticing here, I'll back up to where I should have started. The annex remains. Okay, that's been noted a couple different ways today. The current courthouse remains. Those are long-term, not even on the list of decisions for right now. This is the courthouse, the orange courthouse with the yellow public lobby space on the front of it. It's located here for a lot of reasons. One thing we have to do is we have to have more setback than we have in a typical downtown building, if at all possible. If we're doing this in an ideal world, that's 100 feet. We're not going to get 100 feet on this site. So we can't even get the 83 feet that the Department of Defense talks about as a good setback. So we're looking at trying to get 50 feet. That's what we're showing. So you're seeing it sits back further than the annex. It's about 20 right now. This is another 30. So that pinches everything back that far. There's a 130 foot dimension we have to have in place for parts of the courthouse to work. It's the tallest building that we're talking about developing here. So in the community context, the context of urban planning, we try to have that not be a foreboding element on a neighborhood. So we try to look for an opportunity to make it fit like it always was there, right? So there's that. We have to have the jail and the courts physically connected for security reasons. We kind of like to not repeat what we have right now. So we got that going. The jail itself, well, we need let's see, we need about 1.25 acres on the first floor. If we just start out with the idea we're gonna have a 2-story jail, we can get that to work without doing a 3 or 4-story jail, and that's a good thing. There's some best practices that come into the jail that everything starts with staffing and what the sheriff can afford to staff. And those mandatory staff ups have everything to do with what you're seeing here, this nice purple box, right? So there's that. So there's a civic presence of the courthouse. There's a long-term planning idea for what should that law enforcement center be if it's on this site. Okay. We need good public access to both buildings, but we also want to maintain a separation of entrances from any courthouse to the law enforcement center. The whole separation of and identities really for the judicial process needs to be separate from law enforcement. So we've planned a place here where that can happen. And it can happen with the ability to set it up for future expansion. We've set up the jail so that there's a jail services side with in and out traffic kind of coming off from water and coming off from that alley area back there. So there's a lot of thought that goes into every single way you decide to throw on a site. Okay, just know that this isn't the final answer. All this is that benchmarking point where we can make some big decisions here so we can start designing. And then we're going to revisit every single one of those decisions, excuse me, and we're going to make sure that it still makes sense to each user group, that it still answers those fundamental questions by the judges, by the sheriff, and everybody that uses this building. And it makes sense, as a piece of that civic community. So I've paraphrased a lot. I hope you know that we're serious about looking at this, and that comparison of Greenfield to downtown has not been taken lightly, not at all.
Yeah, I think that's good. Is there anything else, or I'm sure we got just a few left, and then I know there's public comments that we want to happen, so.
Thank you.
I do have one quick question.
Supervisor Matt Chakowski.
Thank you, Chair Hago. You talked about the setback standard from the Department of Justice of 83 feet.
Yep.
And all along, when we've talked about this courthouse jail project, our number one driver has been safety.
Yep.
Safety, safety, safety. I hear it over and over again. I hear safety from the judges. I hear safety from the sheriff and even county board members.
Yep.
Why are we sacrificing safety?
Great question.
Why don't we push that to 83 feet? Like the experts say.
Great question, and we will look at that if we can get it back that far. Here's what it's gonna come down to, though. There are, even the General Services Administration, okay, the federal courthouses that are built in every state. When they get in an urban setting, they make exceptions. All right, the setback thing, if you're not gonna play by the guidelines, well, then what? Then are your windows gonna be just standard commercial windows with standard commercial glass? No, not if it's a federal project. You're gonna have some hardening of the exterior that's gonna cost you some money. So you can do things. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, right? Put a tank closer to a pipe than you can your F-150, but you might want to reinforce it a little bit, right? So that's what it comes down to. So that's where all of these things have, like, there's so many ways to go in the weeds, guys, but with all the details on this, we could be here for weeks.
I just understand that, but we've emphasized safety through this whole project. And then all of a sudden, even though it's a conceptual plan, and I know it's not a plan, and you said that all before, but now all of a sudden we're sacrificing safety. That worries me.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move on to the next question here. So we wanted to revisit this slide, which everybody had seen before, which we've been talking about these two projects. We boiled them down to some probable costs, right? 165 million for a greenfield, 175 million for downtown phase 1. But as you're coming into the point where we're going to vote, we thought it was really important to remind everyone that these are on a scale. And that's exactly why we asked Bruce and his team to go through that slide with conceptual versus schematic, design development, all the way through. Because we still have a lot of questions that need to be answered and decisions that need to be made before this number firms up. And as we move into those next phases, we'll know if these dark numbers or the dark box is sliding this way or sliding this way. And we know that everybody wants to know what that number is. But to get to that number, we need to get to the location, and then we need to get to that next level of design. So I just bring that up as a reminder, and then I know the financing, sorry, I'm drawing a blank, the documents that you have to vote on are gonna be coming out soon. And so as you're thinking through what those numbers are, just please remember that. So go to the next slide. You've seen this before as well, and I just put this up here. Again, so we move to the next phase, schematic design, in order to start narrowing that band of cost. You're looking, let's just say $2.5 million is roughly what that schematic design is, which is why we think it's so important to be able to select a location. Because if we don't select the location, you have to do that process on 2 sites, which just doesn't really make sense. It isn't something that we would recommend. All right, let's go to the next slide. Jenny, we'll let you talk about this one.
So, one of the questions that's come up is right around financing, or what is financing cost, and comparing the two projects. So the first thing I'd say is, remember, we're talking about concepts, so your financing numbers are based on a concept, and as we further this along, they could look different down the road. So this is just really to give you a comparison, so that you have something to kind of see on paper. So I don't want you to take it for more than what that's worth as we go down this process. It's really intended to just demonstrate the differences between the two options in 2 different scenarios. The one bond issue is if we were to borrow for the entire project all at once, which, this isn't something we're going to do. So this is just to kind of walk us through what this looks like. So don't leave this room thinking that this is actually what we're talking about having happen. But if we were to take the 2 plans and say we build them all at once, we have a downtown and greenfield bond issue. Now, we made the assumption the same, that they're 20-year bonds and they're at the same interest rate and they have level principal and interest payments. So in the first comparison, for the one issue, you're looking at a difference of like $70.6 million between the difference in the cost of the bonds and the difference in the cost and the interest payments. The second comparison is if we were to do this on a phased approach and phase in the bond issues. Again, same length for the bonds, same interest, but just over the phases of a phased in project for both sites. And the difference in that scenario is a difference of $171 million. Now, again, we didn't take into account current cost or current value. This is based on the future value, but this is just to give you the comparison because people wondered what's the difference in the financing cost based on the two models. This is a very flat approach to looking at this, so that's why I don't want you to take it for more than it's worth. But bottom line is you have one project that costs less and one project that costs more. So in either scenario, your financing is going to cost more than the project that costs more. That's just the way it works. There are things and tools that we will utilize when we actually go to finance projects. We will phase in bonds. We will schedule bond and interest payments so that we can maximize growth over time with equalized value. We have a lot of those tools that we will use. We didn't do that in any of this modeling. This is just for comparison's sake, so that you have the information. And then just one other thing that I wanted to mention since I'm up here and I'm kind of going rogue. One thing that's come up tonight multiple times has been security and safety. And so many people see the finance director and finance department as we represent, we talk about money all the time. But the one thing that my department is also responsible for in this county is risk management. And I find myself very fortunate that we work with departments every day that take that incredibly serious. We have law enforcement, we have facilities, we have a court system with the DA's office and the judges. They've all talked about it. And at the end of the day, that's why we're talking about this project. That's what it's been about day one. And I just want to remind everybody why we're talking about it. And we talk about these issues all the time. They face them every day. It's not even just your employees, it's the people using the services, it's our community. And I just think that we just can't lose focus of why we're talking.
And let's go, we just have one last slide, and then we will be done. So there's been a lot of
I
conversation.
don't want anybody to get excited. We're just done with the presentation.
We'll be done. How about that? There's been a lot of conversation about Portage County versus Wood County, because it feels like it's similar, and it's been in the news. And so we've tried to obtain as much information from Wood County as we could. Little disclaimer, publicly available sources. Put that up there because how a question is answered, as everyone knows, in the paper or the way that somebody decides to classify this cost versus that cost, unless you can get to the finite details, it's really difficult. So we did our best to find the best information we had. But what we think is really important is to show you that what Wood County is doing and what Portage County is working to do are not real similar projects. Portage County is looking at a 100,000 square foot jail with a 76,000 square foot courthouse and somewhere around 240 parking stalls for phase one. Wood County has a little over 100,000 square foot jail, so that's similar. No courthouse, 14 parking stalls, and a 23,000 square foot LEC. So we bring that up because I know there's been some concerns about costs that have hit the papers and that have been discussed. So our first answer is the costs are going to be different because the projects are different. Our other comment that we're going to make, costs are going to be different because Wood County was hard bid in 2022 based on a completed set of design documents. We're hoping to bid our project in 2024. We have a budget that's been put together by construction and industry experts with the help of some of the best jail designers in the country. So we're trying to project what the project is actually going to be and what the project is actually going to cost 2 years from now without a full design. So again, we would expect those costs to be different. And then kind of one more thing is we were trying to get some comparison of the jails that are being built. The total bed count for Portage County is 280. We believe the Portage bed count for Wood County is about 285. We've tried to count it up based on some publicly available drummers. General population bed count, how many beds are you actually gonna use? 200 for Portage County, right? These other 80 beds are related to functional purposes, classifications, medical, mental health, Huber, I keep going down the line, right? So we don't know what they have for general population beds in Wood County, but it would be reasonable to think it's similar in percentage. But then here's where it gets a little bit tricky. We're discussing ours in the media as a 200 bed jail because we've got 200 general population beds. When you read about Wood County, they discuss a 300 bed. Well, from what we can tell, that's all of their beds, right? So we're talking about jails in two different ways. And I only bring that up, not because one is right or one is wrong, but because the methodology is different. And so when we're asked to compare Wood County, we're not comparing apples to apples. So we've asked, this is Joe, he's with Findorf Construction. Joe, is there anything beyond
No,
that?
I think one other couple points, within the Wood County square footage, there's about 9,000 square feet of covered parking. I don't know where that falls in that square footage, whether it's in the LEC or in the jail, but again, that's where we can't get into that detail and we can't get that information. Probably one other note, April 1, ENR, so Engineering News Record, comes out with their inflation for what they're projecting. From August 1 to April 1, their BCI and CCI indexes are indicating about 6% inflation in construction costs. So to Mike's point about we're trying to project where the costs are going to be. But it's a very volatile market. That's very dangerous. The Wood County costs are hard costs. They're done. They're contracted and run constructed. I would say the sites are considerably different as well because Wood County's site really didn't have any demo, where the downtown site would have a significant amount of demo.
Perfect. And you reminded me of one more item that I wanted to bring up, and that's for Portage County. If everyone remembers, I'm gonna say a year ago now, Findorf was selected as your construction manager at risk. Integra supports that approach, and we really worked with the county and the county attorney's office to get that that construction method in place. And I believe it was the first time that Portage County has used construction manager at risk, as far as we can tell. One thing that's really important to know is that their contract says when this design is done, every component of it will be competitively bid. And so at the time that we go to build it, we will have competitive bids. The correct contractors will be chosen for each of the scopes. And the final cost of this project is going to be driven off of that market pricing obtained from the local contractors. So that 175, 165, 190, whatever number we want to talk about, that is our best budget of what we think this project is going to cost 2 years from now. And that will get solidified and it'll get dialed in as we move into those next phases of the design. So that's everything that I have.
Supervisor Splinter.
I'm sorry, I'm a little slow. Can you back up to the financing slide again? Because I'm gonna confirm in my head what I'm looking at, and I'm sure it's a simple question, but it's germane to the whole process here. Okay, sorry.
Go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, if you look at the phased in bond issues, which are over several years, which I mentioned before, where I mentioned 105 million and somebody said it wasn't where did that come from? Now I get it again, which is $104,540,000 more to do it downtown. But there's another $66,804, or $66,804,250 more in interest. So instead of $105 million difference, or the elephant in the room, I see it as $171,344,250. Am I correct in what you're saying?
This gets at that future value cost versus current present value cost. So, if you take from the last meeting, I think Mike had prepared on his slide to say, although it shows 100 million because we're using future project costs. Because we're estimating.
Because we're not billing it We're not building it all at once, we're building it
Correct.
into the future.
So we're building in those, what we think the future value of that project's going to be based on expert,
Okay,
insight. But you also have to take into account that, people's incomes are going to go up, costs of services are going to go up over time as well. So if you were, that's why we have the comparison. If you did it all at once, this is like today's dollars, versus over time, this is what it would look like. But we have to take into account that other things are going to go up as well. Equalized valve is gonna go up.
I'm just saying, $171 million is a lot extra to put on the backs of our county taxpayers to get exactly the same square footage, exactly the same jail, and it doesn't make sense. Sorry. I just can't get past that elephant in the room. If anybody else can look around it, by all means, defend why you need to spend that much more money for the exact same process. Sorry.
Supervisor Medine.
How many stories is the jail in Wood County?
I believe it's 4.
All right. That it, Mike?
Yep, that's everything that we had prepared for tonight.
Now we're going to get into the public comments, and I want to remind everybody that you have 3 minutes. It'll show up on the screen when your time is up. Please wrap it up. Thank you. They're coming down.
When he announces.
Yep, Robin's gonna start sending the ones upstairs down as well, so. Go ahead.
First up is Eric Olson.
Eric Olson, I live on West River Drive here in Stevens Point. I'm the person who did send out a total mileage estimate to everybody. I don't want to get into this in too much details, but I just point out, one way to interpret this would be, how much would you have to pay in mileage? Because if you go to meetings, or if we had to bring everybody in the county to a specific intersection, how much would you have to pay in mileage? And you take the total amount of miles on the table that I showed you and multiply that by whatever your per mile rate is. It seemed like a relevant decision, or a relevant factor to consider is, how many miles would everybody in the county have to drive to get to a certain place? Somebody else mentioned a 15-minute drive time, and how moving locations around can increase the number of people in a 15-minute drive time. That's totally understandable. I didn't think we were necessarily looking at time. We're looking at the total distance traveled. I guess after hearing this earlier portion, I also want to point out, it has been decisions by previous county boards that have driven the pattern of development around Portage County. That 140 years ago, a big decision was made to locate the county seat in Stevens Point, and Stevens Point was just a small community on the river here. About 25 years ago, the county got into the business of basically becoming a developer. And the county engaged with landowners, and they developed the Portage County Business Park. That didn't just happen because of market forces or because demand was where it was. That was decisions by the county board to create a business park out east of the interstate. A few years later, the county board made decisions to locate a commercial enterprise just south of that, the Crossroad Commons project. That didn't just happen because land values where they were, what they were, and a developer came in and made that happen. You all invested your county planning staff time, and you made decisions to make Crossroad Commons happen. And the people downtown in Stevens Point felt this. The movement of all that commercial activity out of downtown was felt. The mall did fail. The mall did have to get torn down. And there is certainly the Mid-State building, which is reusing a big chunk of it. That also is not on the tax roll. But the economic effects are still there. And I think somewhere, maybe, there's like a plan that's drawn up that says everything east of 39 along HH is going to be the new downtown of a new whatever community, Stockton, Hull, everything east, and it's all going to be 5-acre lots, and it's all going to be homes on septic systems and wells. That's what I think is really happening. They want the new downtown east of the interstate, and I think basically everybody west of the interstate is going to be asked to pay for it. Thanks.
Keith Biasen.
If Keith isn't down here yet, you want to go to the next one?
Sure.
You have to be.
Michael Juris.
My name is Mike Juris. I'm retired middle school teacher, Marvin School District. I've been on the Amherst Village Board since 1985, only for another week or two yet. I've served as village president since 2001. I've gone through a lot of the studies. I've visited the jail. Back when we were talking about the security issues and so on, I mean, they were pretty obvious to all of us, that things need to be addressed. And it's unfortunate that we're still looking at the same questions and trying to decide how best to handle them. And listening to all of what's gone on here tonight, I've got a real collage of comments, and thankfully, most of you have kind of answered or kind of finished my thoughts on these, but speaking from the other side of the watershed and looking over at what's happening here, there are many of us out there that see this kind of as win-win-win-win-win for the city. There's going to be a development that's going to occur adjacent or could develop adjacent or outside of the city with the greenfield. There's the potential for redevelopment downtown. Seeing what's happened in other central Wisconsin communities, you would think that this would be a good thing that the city might look at with some anticipation. This would be the most efficient use of tax dollars, especially in light of the 171 million now that we're looking at for all the residents. But I do take a little bit of issue sometimes when people talk about the community, what's best for the community. Sometimes we get the sense that the community, the capital C, really means the city. And what's best for the county is what you should be looking at. What's best for the county? And that includes people from my side of the watershed, someone from the other side of the river in Junction City, someone from Rosholt or from Elmond as well. The idea that transportation is an issue, no doubt. I mean, if you move it out to a greenfield, the city has transportation facilities that could accommodate that. There are no buses running through downtown Amherst. We're gonna have to come in and get here somehow anyhow. And the greenfield site may be the best spot for us. But the idea that this needs to benefit the entire county, I think, gets back to this idea of pinnacles. I heard about this architecture is going to be a pinnacle for downtown Stevens Point. I think you have to compare pinnacles to what's practical. What benefits the county residents and at what cost? Long-term as well as short-term. The infill, the opportunities, I think the city has before it often get overlooked in this conversation. I would like to see the county and the city work together on this, but I think that the supervisors sitting around this table represent the entire county. You have to, I've seen some local leaders draw lines in the sand and saying, this is what it's got to be. And I think you need to step back and take a look at what's best for the entire county.
Richard Ruffle.
Nineteen 1972 Church Street in Stevens Point. I've spoken here before. A lot of what I wanted to say is already been touched upon, so I won't waste your time. I guess I'm for the new justice centers remaining in the city, and I say that for the sake of the offenders for the most part. I've never had any run-ins with the law. I'm almost 70. I think I'm doing pretty well, but I do feel that a clean site. It's going to be difficult for them to get to for their various appointments and so on and so forth. It's going to cost a lot of infrastructure to get them there. A large percent of them, as I understand it, live in Stevens Point or live in Clover. There's also lawyer fees that have to do with travel costs that's brought to my attention. I think Anderson Law on Main Street charges $350 an hour for maybe 4 to 6 court appearances. But they don't charge travel fees because, of course, they're downtown. So is the courthouse. Whereas if travel fees for these the lawyers are involved, the greenfield site, it's estimated to be $800 to $1,000, even for their costs for getting to and from their appointments. I think it's better for them. Most of the halfway houses are downtown, Clover.
to have it, site here. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Elizabeth Schrader,
She went home.
You.
Trevor Rohr, Andrea Olson,
Okay, so we would not be here right now if a state environmental quality review was done, but that is also what a feasibility study pretty much is what it's all about, and it gets your state and local government agencies working together, point, then the Portage County, and consider environmental impacts equally with social and economic factors during discretionary decision making, like right now. It can significantly remove bias when planning and can move a project along and prevent individuals from derailing it. So when we're looking at this project, we can look at the redevelopment downtown as one of the big things. We have a ton of land already available downtown. We have land across the river. We have land at the WPS lot, but that's polluted, but that'll be coming back into play sometime. And the city has a big master plan for the downtown too. And this center right here was part of it. If this goes away, we then have to now figure out what to do next, which that's a lot because you already have tons and tons of office buildings downtown vacant. They can't even fill most of the new ones that have been built over on the Lullaby lot. And it's bad. Like, look, think about the businesses down here. So one of the other things is why are we doing this in phases? The design is built around doing everything in phases. Multiple lower rise buildings create requirements for the phase. If you look at an aerial view and then design around it, around the open lots, it is possible to design differently. The Berkshire building down the street, 119,000, first floor has parking that's hidden. We don't have to have an ugly jail with ugly parking garages and all of that, or just parking lots everywhere. You could hide the parking. Prisoners don't have to be on the first floor of buildings either. Dane County has prisoners higher up, and Buffalo, New York put on a 100,000 square foot addition on 15,000 square feet. We can look at everything down here, and there's countless buildings that aren't spread out. They're concentrated in a small area. So here we should be looking at the AIA Justice Facilities Review Awards over the years. The buildings look better than most offices too, and apartment complexes. These are beautiful buildings. You don't look at a jail. You don't even realize it's a jail. So you can keep the downtown looking good. And also, I had a little kid playing upstairs. You look at here, you can put one building here. You can put one building here. And this one is one story, but takes up the same amount of space as a two-story building right here. You need more space, you can put it up top. You can redesign many different ways, and we all know how to design like this because most of us have all played with Lego at one point in time.
Andrea. Mike.
I'll just have a couple of comments on that.
Okay.
The project wasn't designed to be built in phases. It was designed, master plan to be built as one. It was broken into phases to address the 40% debt to equity, or I'm sorry, debt capacity that was determined to be financially feasible by the director of your finance group. Building parking hidden is absolutely an option. It would add cost to the project, but if that was something that the county's interested in, that is something that could happen. Vertical construction, again, is an option. It'll add operational costs, construction costs, and complexity to the design. So that is why what was determined was the most cost-efficient way to build buildings on the sites that we had available. And then as far as downtown looking good, obviously there was a focus on high quality and design elements that would be acceptable. At the end of the day, a jail does have some limitations.
I would just add for a security standpoint, parking within a jail or a courthouse would not be allowed just because it's clearly would be a huge security risk for the buildings. So
Like Oklahoma City?
No, New York City just redesigned theirs too.
Okay, and then Jenny, did you have a comment on?
The only thing that I wanted to add that you didn't mention was operational costs. A lot of the.
He did.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Wayne Bushman. He's upstairs.
They were told to come down.
Totally doesn't speak.
Okay, good enough, thank you. Nathan Sandwich, the last one.
Hi, my name is Nathan Sandler, a resident of 633 Portage Street. That's how I'm here tonight. We all know we've hired architects and still no building. I would simply say if you want results, hire a public manager. A resolution was passed in 2015. It passed 14 to 11, if I'm not mistaken, to rebuild downtown. That's the result a public manager would have helped you pursue, I believe. At that time anyway, in the interim time, 8 years or so, the added costs of construction and so forth. And for me, what's relevant is the time spent here tonight, rather than dinner with my family, is just among the many frustrations that happen, I think, when you've got basically folks who don't accept that result and aren't working towards it. I guess there's a variety of steps you all know along the way, but that's how I see it. Hire a public manager if you want to get stuff done and work towards results. I have yet to hear a very convincing reason to relocate facilities to an unspecified greenfield location. Incidentally, I also seriously question assumptions on which arguments to relocate, seem to rest. I question a lot of those assumptions. We could, other people have also done so, but a couple that come to my mind, considering the volatility in jail population, I think a jail that's so large that you'd never have to transport anyone, to me, that's a jail that's overbuilt. So you could probably find yourself with a few more options if you kind of relax that assumption a little bit. But in general, I think, my general advice is to do nothing, because in my mind, this question of where to locate was already decided. And by resolution by county board. So I guess take it as a reminder and move forward.
Sheriff, can you address the jail needs a little bit there? That comment was made.
What are you looking for, the jail needs?
Yeah, the comment was made that the jail size of the number of beds that was in it was too large that we would never transport anybody.
Sure, this started back in 2001, actually. The first study came, said that by today's date, we should be at a 500 to 600 bed jail. They did another study back in 2007, I think it was, if I recall. They put it back at about 500 beds. And then in 2015, we did a study in regards to, through the years, in regards to classification and maximum jail capacity, trimmed it down to 200 beds. Now that 200 beds is 80% capacity. When you saw that 280, remember, we have a juvenile detention facility in that also. So there's a bunch of beds for the juvenile detention facility that the county made a priority. The second is we have holding cells, mental health cells, and items like that that are not considered jail bed cells. So out of the 200 beds, so we can go to 80%, and that would be classification for different classifications in our jail. Right now, we cannot classify our inmates. So what I'm talking about that is, as everybody's seen, we've had shooting victims, shooting suspects, we've had shooting all kinds of people in our jail homicides, where we cannot separate from some non-violent criminals at all times. And we try. I mean, our corrections staff does an extenuating job in regards to what they do and how they monitor. We are a linear-based jail with a pod system jail and a new facility. We've actually reduced the amount of people that would be needed on the floor because of a pod system.
So if you haven't had an opportunity to look at the jail, I think just about all the county board has. But I encourage the public to call me in regards to the population, how we classify now, how we're supposed to classify. And if we do any remodeling in our facility, that means that the DOC would shut us down in regards to that. Because I looked at that and I told everybody here, I mean, I was a proponent of remodeling, but it came back to nearly $30 million to remodel that facility, reduced us by 12 beds. And so we still have, you know, 100,000 or $1 million in transport costs, because my contracts alone are about 500,000. Then we got to talk about our staffing and transportation fees. So it's very costly. And if you look at cumulative costs, matter of fact, I'll be presenting the county board here coming up on the 18th, I think is the county board, my annual report for 2022. So you can actually see all the costs that are associated with it that are documented in regards to the maximum daily bed, you know, how many juvenile detention people we have throughout the year, how much we contact, how much revenue we get for juvenile. So it gives you an offset in regards to that. But that's the reason why the 200 bed facility, and that would be, I'm saying it is sufficient for nowadays, Nathan, but I'm telling you, that's today's number. So
I got you. And that's the piece where I question is the idea that we need to make Mr. to have future expansion. That's, you know,
that's coming from me, to be honest with you, Nathan, because I think Mike, I want to address the comments to me, please. I don't want the back and forth. But I think if we don't have forward thinking in regards to future expansion, we end up with what we have over here. We didn't have forward thinking in the past in regards to expansion because they thought we could build up, but we didn't have the footings on that building to build up. So that's a priority for me, for a taxpayer, because I live in the county, and I think it's very important that in the future, if by chance our jail population increases and we have to add a 100-bed pod, we better have a spot for it that is suitable for it. And, you know, not in a floodplain, you know, not in things like this that we can actually build on. So those are some of my priorities. Thank you. Supervisor Pataki.
Question for the sheriff. Jail inspector comes through how often to inspect the jail?
Once a year. Just got notified we'll be doing the jail inspection.
Okay. If the jail inspector finds something that is not right, can you shut the jail down?
They can.
Or he or she?
We are grandfathered in under the clause right now, but if we do expansion or remodeling, we would be, because we are not up to certain things.
Okay, so how long can we be under
grandfather?
Pardon?
Under grandfather.
Yeah. If we don't do what the jail inspectors tell us to do, and we have a certain amount of time to get it done.
We have corrective actions, you know, every year that come up. The deficiencies of the linear jail and certain things we cannot change. They understand that. There is nothing until we do a remodel. There are certain things that we have to upgrade in regards to, you know, security and things like that within the jail that is not considered a major remodel. But once any major remodel does, then we have to put all the jail under the current codes to the DOC 350.
And we got any warnings from the inspector as to why we're not doing certain things, or it's taking so long to build the new jail?
The only warning I got is not doing a major remodel. Thanks, Sheriff. All right, that's everybody that signed up. Is there anybody else from the public that wishes to speak before I turn it over to the board? Thank you. All right, Supervisor Matt Chakowski.
The sheriff talking about the juvenile justice center, the juvenile jail. I've heard that many times that that's a priority of the county, and I realize that probably came through public safety as a priority of county. Can you elaborate on why that's so important to the county? In the news lately, in the last probably 4 years, 3-4 years, we've heard a lot about the statewide juvenile incarceration. With that happening, and why is it so important that Portage County does that? And also, is that something that we actually take a revenue in on?
It is, but I will tell you, I know HHS is here today, but I'm not putting her on the spot, but I will tell you that if we did not have the juvenile detention center for our Portage County, we would be having extreme expenses because a jail bed throughout the state is way more than what we contract an adult bed. On an average, right now, Marathon County is contracting at $500 a day for a bed, for a juvenile detention. We are at $250. There are, Brown County, Eau Claire, and some of the others have reduced or closed the juvenile facilities, which we have been getting contract beds throughout the state in regards to other health and human services to come to our facilities. So we have contracted beds for certain counties throughout Portage County, but we have mandated beds for Portage County alone. And if we didn't have that,
Now I know why it's a priority. Thank you, Sheriff.
thank you. Anybody else? Comments, concerns, thoughts? I can't believe this group's shy.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Supervisor Barry Kukowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, fellow board members. There's been several times that it's been mentioned that we had a vote to build the new facility downtown. And I would thank Nathan for reminding me that it was 14 to 11. Not certain whether that was the exact vote, but we'll go with Nathan. I've always trusted Nathan. We have to remember a 14-11 wasn't a unanimous vote, and it wasn't anywhere close to unanimous. We also have to remember when that was said, at that particular time and moment, we never had a vote to finance it. I don't believe at 14 to 11 that we've ever got the supermajority that it takes to finance that. And I would like the last thing that we should think about here this evening, and maybe that's just my part, I should say the last thing we should think. The last thing that I will think about as I leave this evening, somebody joked about this being monopoly money. And it is just fake money. Tonight, this is just fake money. When we go to build the facility and every day that goes by that we're not working towards building a facility, this is real spendable taxpayer dollars. I don't care whether you laugh and call it monopoly money or whatever, but this is real taxpayer dollars. We leave here every evening, every day, not doing something. My constituents don't want to lose that kind of money. We've already increased the cost of this facility by threefold by sitting here on our thumbs. Let's move it forward. We all know that it's going to cost way too much to build this facility downtown. I said from day one that I got on this board, we cannot shoehorn another facility downtown. And many of you have heard me tell the story. I've been coming to that facility across the road since I was 4 or 5 years old with my father, when the Farm Service Agency at that time was called the ASCS office. And there wasn't a place to park back in the 60s. The minute we have a jury trial and have to pick a jury pool, and forgive me for not remembering her exact title right now, the jury coordinator, the first thing she'll say, every jury I've ever said, has anybody parked in that north lot? And half the jury pool gets up and leaves and is gone for at least 45 minutes, maybe an hour, because they drove around here trying to find one of those mythical on-street parkings that are over here. The 176, whatever it was in the last meeting we had. We have to remember, we can't shoehorn another facility down here. Thank you, and thank you for your time, everybody.
Anybody else? They get out of here even earlier than 8. Supervisor Keller.
I would like the chair to ask a question of the supervisors. I've only been a supervisor for a year. We've had a lot of meetings already on this. That's been going on for years and years and years. How many of the supervisors in all of these meetings have heard something that's going to change their position? I'm not hearing anybody moving an inch.
I think just leaving it as a statement versus me. I don't know how I would call that question.
Leave it rhetorical. Thank you. I just wanted to make that comment.
No other discussion. Supervisor Dubek.
So the plan or the timeline for all this, whatever you want to call it. Tomorrow night, there will be a Space and Properties meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
They'll come back with a resolution, either picking a green field site or the downtown site. And then next Tuesday, on the 18th, we will vote on said resolution, up or down, right there.
And then we will have a special meeting on May 2nd. And that's the one about approving the money. And that's the one where Supervisor Jakowski had commented, whereas before, because of the fact, and I wasn't the chair at the time, but because of the fact of the split of the vote, almost 50-50, they didn't go forward with the finance vote for the simple reason they didn't think anything was going to come of it, is my understanding. So we will have a discussion on the 18th about approving the location, and that will be what we'll be discussing that night. On May 2nd, what we'll be discussing is not the location anymore, because that will be determined on the 18th. What we'll be talking about on the 2nd is financing the money to go ahead and go forward to build it.
And that's where it's gonna take a super majority of 19 of us.
19 of us, yes. And I have heard nobody in this room or any of these 25 people that are on the board saying that we should not build it. And I think somebody else somewhere along the line during the meeting tonight had alluded to that. And I believe with the judges, the DA and the sheriffs have all said the same thing, that something needs to get done. And we've got to move this forward. And I would suspect that once we get to that point, that there would be nothing less than a unanimous vote to approve the funding. Once we get past the simple question to be determined of the location. Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all agree that we need to build a jail. Everybody knows it. The judges are asking for it, begging for it. The sheriff is begging for it. The DA has stepped in and said, he has a preference and he values safety. I would really urge the Space and Properties Committee to make a wise choice tomorrow. I know that wisdom is not the same for everybody. But if you choose the downtown site, we can just go ahead and vote on it because you'll get funding immediately. We'll all agree on that. If you vote on a greenfield site, my worry and fear is that funding will not come. The funding votes will not be there. I don't think this is an argument we want to have if we want to move forward with this project. If we move to choose a greenfield site and the funding's not there, are we prepared for a battle to move the county seat? Because I know that's on the table. It was in our packet.
It was a question that was brought up.
Right.
And
It's a good question.
all questions by all supervisors are brought up and answered.
It's a good question. But are we prepared for 18,000 signatures in 30 days? Are we prepared for that movement in our county? I don't think that's something we want to toy around with. I don't think that'll pass either. So we have an opportunity to maybe not agree, all of us to agree on one location. We do have the opportunity and we are in consensus. I'm almost 100% positive, I mean 99% sure that we want to build this facility for our community. That's somebody coming from a guy who is a big criminal justice junkie, right? Not a big fan of building jails. But we can all support a location that we own the land, get creative. Our architects, our building team, financing, we can put a building down here that would work for our community and not shoehorn it, right? We have a good partner with the city. We have good partners with all of our team. I think we can do this. I just don't want to prolong this battle anymore. I mean, I've been here only 6 years. I can't imagine what it's like for Don, for Stan. Been fighting this battle forever. We need to move forward as a community. And I know it's not easy to agree, but We got the funding if we do it downtown.
I would agree that we need to move forward and with that again, no matter what the location is, I would expect it would be unanimous. Supervisor Don Jankowski.
We're not talking about moving the seat. We're talking maybe about moving to a site in the city, which we have to be in. So it's not moving the county seat. We don't need to move the county seat to build this building in a green site. But we do need to build the building. We need to build one that is able to be added on in the future. We're not going to be here in 15, 20 years. Those people are going to have to look at what can they do at that site if we shoehorn them into this site.
Supervisor Syke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, listening to Supervisor Moresi, I still can't figure him out. He has one of the best poker faces ever. I heard a lot of, you know, we can all agree and we'll all pay for it if we vote on downtown. And then if you listen really close, I thought I almost heard him say that he would even agree to pay for it if it wasn't downtown. But again, I can't hardly read him. He's got the best poker face in the room. So thank you, Supervisor Moresi.
Supervisor Pataki, then Supervisor Keller.
Again, to remind everybody, Mr. Moresi just spoke and mentioned going to jail 2 times. Jail. This is not just a jail. It's the jail and the courthouse, all right? That if people on the street think we're gonna build a jail for $180 million, they're gonna say no. But they know there's a courthouse attached to it, they'll probably agree to it.
Supervisor Keller.
I'm just gonna expand on what Supervisor Soik said. What I definitely heard from Supervisor Moresi was, if we don't approve a downtown site, he will not vote to approve the money. Isn't that, would you ask him for me? I'm not supposed to speak directly to him.
If that's what supervisor's position is, which I don't have any idea that it is, I think that's his right to have. But I don't think that it's at all productive for us to sit here and have questions being called to you to ask what people's positions are.
Supervisor Shabilsky.
I wasn't here. I have a question for you. When the vote was 14-11 to keep it downtown, why wasn't there a unanimous funding vote then?
Because the two was almost split and you needed to get to that 19 and I think that.
But if you're expecting a unanimous vote, no matter what the location
Back then
vote
we had
is.
individuals that didn't think we needed to build a jail.
I mean, from everything I've read from the last 20 years, I thought it was fairly understood that this was a situation that's been a problem since basically the 90s.
Well, Jeannie's up there.
She's up there.
Oh, Jeannie's online. I can't, Mike, were you here, Sheriff, were you here at the time? Can you speak to that a little bit as well?
The reason why I didn't go forward because it was all buildings. It wasn't the jail and courts. So it was the whole complex at once being built. And there were some that didn't believe in some of the things being built.
And we just still doesn't happen.
That answer your question?
Yeah, and it just, looking back on, I've been trying to read up on this about 20 years of newspapers and minutes and stuff. And it just seemed, to me, my opinion, it seems like there's a progression. Every few years, there's a push for this. So some people want to move it out of downtown. If they can't get the votes, well, we'll wait 2 more years for a new board. We'll try it again. There's no, okay, well, maybe we should compromise in the other direction. It just seems like there's this push to get it out of downtown. If we can't do it now, and that's why the can keeps getting kicked down the road, from what I'm reading.
So that I believe the chair at that time just did not feel that the votes were there for the money. And
I mean, I'm not talking specifically, I'm talking as a general trend. And I mean, I agree, something needs to get done. I just don't know why. I don't know, it just seems one direction.
Supervisor Splinter, then Supervisor Syke.
Sorry, I don't mean to jabber on all night long, but when we were elected, every one of us in here represents 2,800 voters, okay? Taxpayers, people that fund, we wouldn't have anything to talk about if we didn't have taxpayers to fund all the ideas that we come up with. Our number one duty as a board member, a supervisor, is to make sure we use the taxpayers' money and get the best bang for the buck. Okay? And if you can argue for a downtown site where it's the best bang for the buck, I'll listen. If it's a greenfield site, which I think $171 million is a big elephant, that's a big financial elephant. And you're representing the county's interest in your decisions, not the town of Hull. I've heard from the town of Hull what they thought, and you're not representing the city. If you want to represent the city, run for the city council. You'll represent the city then. But you're representing the county as a whole. And remember, there's 72,000 people in our county that need something to get done. And I don't need to hear where, well, if I don't get my way, I'm not going to vote the funding. Well, come on, guys. Makes sense. I'm just looking at it from a high school debate team point of view as to which side makes most sense. And it's evident to me, I don't know. We just need to move forward, and we can't get stuck because every month we're stuck. It's $800,000. And we can't look back. We got to look forward. And the last thing I'm going to say, the other part of our being supervisors is that we have to be visionaries. We can't just look at what's needed right now. We can't say, oh, well, we'll fix that problem now. Well, then what's down 20 years down the line? I'm thinking 20 years down the line almost all the time in any decision I'm looking at. And this is a big one because 20 years down the line, things will change. And you want to be able to move and groove and expand whatever you want to do. You can't go, oh, we can't do anything now. Think ahead, use your head, listen to, we've talked about it. And on the Space and Properties Committee, from the very beginning that I was on it, I said, we all need to get educated along at the same level so that when we get down to where the rubber meets the road, which is next month or the end of this month, we're all educated. And you got to think again, can you explain to the taxpayers why you're going to spend so much money? And if you can, go ahead. But I'm just getting emotional about because I don't want this thing to stop. And I need to see that my taxpayers are getting the best bang for their buck, and they're not going to get burdened with costs that are not needed. Thank you.
Supervisor Soik, then Supervisor Pataki, and then I'll let everybody know it is 8 o'clock and I'm a man of my word. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Supervisor Splinter. Thank you, Supervisor Shabilsky. So I'm going to speak for myself. When we look at this jail, justice center, courthouse, referendums, and so on, when Sheriff Lucas first ran for sheriff, he campaigned on no new jail, and I voted for him because that was my position at that time. And at that time, for the last 30 years, as we've been looking at this and going through different referendums through the county, I had told my county supervisor, whether it was Dickie Barden, Carl Karszewski, or Dale O'Brien, that absolutely not, as my county supervisor, do I want you to vote for a new jail when we just got one in 93 and we're talking about it in 97, in 2001, 2003, all the way to 2015. So the 2015 vote, my supervisor not only voted against the jail downtown, he voted against the jail period, because we, myself and other people in the town that he represented of the 2,800 had asked him
We don't need a new jail. We don't need a new justice center. We already have one. The county supervisors of 1990 or whenever it was, were not good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. Well, we're not in 97, we're not in 2007, and we're not in 2015 anymore. And as Mr. Pinkel back there will testify, I can be swayed and changed. And with the sheriff and being on the public safety committee, I have been swayed and changed. And therefore, not only have I been swayed and changed, but the people I represent, the 2,800, I have not had one person call me and say no to a new jail. Now, I've had plenty of them call me and say, green space, do not cram it downtown. They called me and they said, do it right. Don't make the same mistakes that they made back in the late 80s or early 90s when they decided to build the jail, and from the day it was open, it was out of compliance. They said, please don't make that mistake. Do not make the mistake. Have the vision, like Supervisor Splitter's talking about. Look forward, look to the future, because Mr. Haga probably won't be here in 30 years. I'm hoping I'm I'm just saying, you know, he's quite a bit older than I am. We need to look for the future of our children and the people that come after us. And when we get to the county board floor, I'm gonna bring this district attorney's map back. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about our children and low-income housing and crime rate and low-income being the ones that are committing the crime and where this is all taking place. But that's another conversation. But to bring some light, that is what the people I represent believe. I have changed my opinion upon being educated the last 3 years that this is needed. And I'm gonna vote that we build a new jail. And we finance it, and we pay for it, and we get the things we need, not only for today, but for our children and hopefully our children's children. Hopefully we have the ability to add on. Hopefully we'll never need 500-bed jail. What will Portage County have come to if we get to that point? We'll probably have a population of hopefully 1 million. And then it won't be so bad. Give you the numbers. I know Mike's a numbers guy. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dan, you're batting cleanup, so you're done, we're done.
All right. What I'd like to do right now, I'd like to see a show of hands, the supervisor. I was like, full for the funding, whether it's in a city or in a green space. How many of you guys say you're gonna do it? Because we gotta do it, otherwise the cost gets too much money, right?
I don't have it, I can't take any action, Stan, I can't.
No, well, I'm not, we don't need it. Because I would like to see, if there's a commitment here to fund this, wherever it's at.
I'm taking court counsel's advice, Stan, we're not really going there.
Well, thank you.
If that's why you have Stan, I'll take a motion to adjourn. My supervisor, my supervisor, Yossi, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Adjourn. Thank you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.